The League of Legends World Championship arrives in the United States of America. Teams from all around the globe will be in attendance. Europe, the Republic of Korea, the People's Republic of China, and even those Aussies from down under are coming to visit. But most importantly, our local boys, North America, will be fighting for the title. So what can you do to support our homegrown talent? Well, we have the perfect product for you. Copium. Copium this year comes in 3 new revised flavors: Cloud9, 100 Thieves, and Evil Geniuses. Wash all those doubts and fears away with one puff. That's the Copium guarantee. You'll be uttering positive remarks like these in no time. This is our year. Fudge Factor Online. We're developing NA talent. JoJo is a top 10 mid laner. The gap is closing. Domestic titles don't matter, only worlds. Zillion pocket picks will save us. We definitely can get out of groups. This is the group of life. This is the best roster NA has ever sent to Worlds. So get out there and support our boys and purchase some Copium today. Take a puff of positivity, and just maybe, we won't go 0-6. This is maybe the most excited I have ever been to send a team to Worlds. Fuck. Lol.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight, obviously Worlds edition, although, quite frankly, I don't think play-ins counts as Worlds. Like, I just don't know what we're doing at this point. But at the same time, to be fair, what's so silly, there's actually some, you know what, we'll complain about the Worlds format in a second, because obviously this show's brought to you by Esports Bet, and there's no guests, so the whole fucking thing's brought to you by Esports Bet, isn't it? So this one, there's a quick thing to mention. One, there's still time to get the 50,000 DJT bonus if you go to the Esports Bet Discord, which is discord.gg/esports bet, message the mod mill and say Insight and Esports, or later this week our new name sent you, and they'll just credit your account with 50,000 DJT, which you can use to enter the World's Prediction Series 2 competition, which, much like its name, does include Worlds. It actually includes every tournament, by the way, as far as I know, on the platform, and did all year long as it was running. But obviously the best thing about getting the 50,000 DJT is actually someone else would have had to do a really good job with the smaller bonuses earlier this year just to be at 50,000. So it's basically like almost like the blue shell, isn't it? You can just catch up quickly and potentially have a chance to just scoop them wacky racist style at the end. Also, if you actually want to bet real money, crypto, whatever, we all know there's a colloquial difference there, but is there though? Who knows? And then obviously I'm making mad skrill off that with the money that they gave us, to be fair. Oh, that's another thing, by the way. You know, we told you if we win prizes, we'll actually turn them into things that you guys can use. Well, the good news is, even though we did lose a bunch of bets, we've been making it back up. We're actually doing pretty well now, and so that'll soon be activated, but you'll have to wait and see what comes down on that. So if you want to actually put in a first-time crypto deposit, then the classic one is 50% up to 200 USDT. And there's actually an alternative one, which if you know, your brain will now tell you, which means I already did the marketing. And if you don't, I'll keep it as a bit of suspense. Later in the show, I'll tell you. So, okay, back to the format thing. Because there's 2 things about this format that I actually think people are completely messing up here. One, like I said, this happened in CSGO. In CSGO, top 16 teams was the major, right? That was what we called the major. And we used to have a stage before the major, which was like the next 8 teams, and then like 8 of those came into the major. But we used to call that the major qualifier. And essentially, that's what they've sort of done with play-ins now at Worlds. Because if you don't know, years and years and years and years back, they used to be sort of a thing like play-ins without the major regions, but international wildcard qualifier. And it used to be in different parts of the world, and they would even split up like the Asian teams, and the like Turkey and Brazil and the West would be together and stuff. So now they do this. So on the one hand, I want to diss the format and go, like, who cares that EG got through, for example? You've only just got to Worlds now. But at the same time, the reason why I have to almost pause and stop is because it's actually mad. Because let's be real, now that a Korean and an LPL team go into the play-in, there is actually a world where someone's probably one day going to win Worlds from this thing, which, by the way, like RNG obviously is the team that you would look at immediately. So, and the other thing to say is this: as much as I actually don't like the format, this is another thing we're doing in CSGO at the moment. It's really kind of a bit weird. Because in CSGO, we don't have any control over Valve. We don't, they're like some like mad foul god that we can't even truly communicate with or know what they're thinking. And we think,
so
if you
true.
make sacrifices, it'll do something, but sometimes it doesn't. And then sometimes we do nothing and they just change things. So at this point, we just almost feel like you just leave it when things are okay. So even though there are actually a lot of problems in the game right now, Monty, like, basically, we don't complain about them if they actually would ruin the current meta, because then, Valve might fix them and make the meta worse. So along similar lines, as much as I think the way they do the seeds for Worlds is silly, I think the way the group, even there's still that thing of like, you could only have one team, except now there could be two, but then the numbers Mason. So even though they're still doing all that stuff, I told you on the watch party, they've actually accidentally, it's purely accidentally, backdoored into two scenarios I'm loving. One, the reason everyone's memeing the Mad Lions EG series is we finally can get BO5s between teams from the two Western regions that we've always wanted the rivalry between, but it barely ever happens in League of Legends. So one, that's good. And then two, like, even though it's not the biggest deal ever, you also can now get like another matchup. Like if the groups had gone differently, you could have like Mad Lions against RNG or something. That can now happen also. So actually those things I'm in favor of. They're more BO5s, what everyone wants, right?
Sure. It allowed us the first opportunity to have an NA versus EU best of 5 since 2019, which is pretty appalling if you think about it, because it just never happens at MSI, basically. And then, sometimes it can happen at Worlds, but very rarely, especially because it's typically like one NA or EU team that gets out of groups and then they have to face each other. So it can be really awkward to get some of these best of 5s. And it was the first
tweet, by the way. This was a good one. Look, It's shit posting, but it's factually accurate, which is my favorite type of shit posting. You know that, Monty. All I do is like, if people don't know this, because in between the Simple and Ziwu argue in CSGO, I favor Simple. I never lie about Ziwu. I just put the facts on paper that I really like suggest something, but I don't say what they suggest. So all you need to know is Dom had the ultimate shit post. He just goes, days since EU won a best of 5 against NA, 1,235. Days since NA won a BO5 against the EU, 1. Now that is completely factually accurate, but it's hilarious anyway. Fair play to Dom. That's well memed, sir.
I actually didn't know this either, but apparently this was the first time that NA had ever beaten EU in a best of 5 at a Riot event. So that did happen at IEM San Jose when Cloud9 beat Unicorns of Love, which is what I was remembering. But at a Riot event, MSI/Worlds, whatever. This was the first time it had happened, which now is even more hilarious when you think about it, because Cloud9 actually managed to beat a Korean team in a best of 5 3-0 when they 3-0'd the Africa Freaks before this happened, which is somewhat unbelievable. But there's also been, I think, more NA versus Korea best of 5s, I would imagine.
Oh, I'm sure loads, yeah.
So yeah, and obviously Rift Rivals doesn't count, guys. That goes without saying. That goes without saying. So you were thinking that.
It's Rift Rivals, if you don't realize, was like the ultimate manifestation of that fucking meme of like the classic one from like Mean Girls or whatever. Like, stop trying to make Rift Rivals a thing. That's how like everyone felt for years, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that doesn't count. Also, the teams really didn't care about Rift Rivals. There was absolutely nothing on the line, really, for the most part. Like, the teams reluctantly participated, if you talk to the pro players at the time. So yeah,
it was also sort of ruining the summer split every time, if you remember. Like, it was so ill-timed when they put it.
Yeah. I mean, there's really nothing to like about that tournament. Obviously, I think the solution is to destroy the spring split, which is useless, and extend the summer split slightly, and then put some international tournaments at the beginning of the year as well, and then host MSI halfway through summer, and then have Worlds. That would be my preference about how to fix this problem if we're looking for more international best of 5s that might actually matter.
I even think, like, because the real problem at the moment, if you notice, is people won't ever give MSI even close to the world status. So in a weird way, I actually think the closer you can get MSI to Worlds, the better it is for whoever wins MSI. They need to sort of prove themselves in a fucked up way, don't they?
Yep.
It's the same both years for RNG, so let's see.
Yep. I mean, it's just the meta difference is obviously huge. And the meta difference is really big, but compared to summer playoffs to Worlds this time around, really, really different. And that's going to probably lead to some unexpected results, as we'll talk about when we preview the groups. Before we do that, got a couple more announcements for you guys. First off, you can watch this on Spotify, by the way. So you can listen to it on all podcasting services, but you can watch it on Spotify. So please subscribe to our Twitch, YouTube, etc. Also, I am doing watch parties for the rest of Worlds, and many of you caught them.
Right?
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, you're not doing. He's not doing games like I do. He's doing the whole day, basically.
Yes, we're doing the whole day. And if you caught some of it during play-ins, that's great. Obviously, because Twitter suppresses links. It has been hard to get the information out there. I dropped a video on my own YouTube channel I hadn't used, but because I haven't used my Twitch account, so not this Twitch account, Insight on Esports, because we need that to do Counter-Strike watch parties during Worlds, et cetera, but on my Twitch account, that's where everything is going to be, which is just twitch.tv/MonteCristo. So give that a follow. Doe is going to be with me a lot of that. Thorin's been calling in. We're going to bring Wolf over from Korea to be on a couch. And what's cool about this setup is I can have up to 3 people live on a couch. I'm going to bring in some other guests from LA and remotely. And I can have basically infinite people call in. It has the best production quality of any live viewing ever, basically. So it's really, really good. I would very much recommend that you come by and join us for that. So it will be every game for the remainder of the World Championship.
They didn't hire Wolf to work Worlds.
No.
I missed that one. Okay.
No.
So it's only Atlas from the broadcast.
And Chronicler. Those two.
Right, Chronicler as well, to be fair. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Valdez didn't get in either. And, you know, speaking of casters, we talked a little bit about this in previous episodes, because it was interesting that they hired fewer casters for Worlds than they did for MSI this year. So they had 24 for MSI. And they have 22 for Worlds. Now, part of that, I imagine, is that it's more expensive to do Worlds because you're flying. These casters are not casting remotely. Like, usually it's cheaper if it's in like Asia, if it's in China or Korea, because they just put all the casters in one studio and they don't have to send them to all the different venues. But since English is the language of the venues this time, they're going to have to send the casters to each of the locations in North America. They didn't do it in Mexico City because Spanish, I think, was actually in the arena. But they are sending them to New York, Atlanta, and San Francisco. And so part of that is definitely true. But the other part of it is it really looks like they're cutting budgets. As you saw, Pastry Time just announced what I can only interpret to be a forced retirement from casting, given the tone of his piece. Okay. That he knew about for the last several months. And I can just tell you guys right now, this is not the end. Like, the LPL and the LCS are about to just get wrecked.
Dude, I thought it was a bit weird. Like, you know, those ones where, because funny thing is, it's actually Counter-Strike that invented this. In Counter-Strike, when the TOs got really cynical, they stopped just hiring you for the whole event when events became like a week long. And if you were people, funny enough, some of these are the top casters now. If you were like Scrawny Launders, Harry and Hugo, so some of the top casters now in Counter-Strike, this is back when they weren't big names. When I would be at the event, the group stage would finish, and then I'd see them like coming down in the hotel. Like, I'd be about to go for a drink, like, oh, you guys come? And they'd be like, no, we'll go to the airport now. We're like, what? And they'd be like, oh, we don't do the playoffs, like, we're getting sent home now. And then they would like reduce down the time. Dude, like, I saw that Law is going home after the planes. What?
Yep.
She flew all the way there just for the planes. Like, what is this? Like, that's so wild.
He was the only person from the talent, I think, who was in Mexico as well, because everybody else was in Los Angeles.
It's wild, isn't it?
And yeah, she was just doing the interviews there. And so, yeah, I mean, she says she's done. The fact that, how can I say this to you guys? Now, Pastry Time is done with Worlds, which is why he made his announcement, because it sounds like it's the end of his time working on casting, and that is Riot's decision. You have not seen the last of these announcements, is what I'm going to say. But all of those people are obviously not done with Worlds yet, who are going to be making those announcements. So it is, Riot is really making a lot of changes right now. And, this goes back to the ever pressing need for an actual caster union or something to group these people together, multi-year guaranteed deals, these kind of things, because they keep them on 1-year deals for the most part at this point in time, everybody who has moved over into the freelance model. And yeah, it's basically just a culture of constant fear. And when some of these people leave, it doesn't seem like they're going to be left with a lot, because you spent 10 years doing casting, and unless you've developed other applicable skills, which I was very concerned about, and also developing your own media so that you have something that you can fall back on, like the shows and the stuff that Thorin and I and other people are working on right now, it becomes really difficult to sustain yourself, and you kind of just get the boot, and your entire knowledge base is one game in League of Legends, and then where do you go from there? And it's pretty shitty, guys. It's pretty shitty. Like I really feel for what's going on for some of these guys right now. It's clearly not how I want the casting industry to work, and it's a bummer. It's a bummer.
This Pastry Time one is so dirty, though, because if people don't know the backstory, he was the guy where, as far as I know, I think it was even in like the first year of LCS, they were trying to get him over to America. And it took him, if you remember, years to actually get like the paperwork to actually go and work there. Like, absolutely, I'm talking years, guys. Like, he was out of the scene,
he was in
like,
Beast
in
of
the
Hell
background.
forever.
It was mental, yeah. And then finally, after years, he got there. And it's like, this just shows you what loyalty Riot has. And you just, oh, well, you're at the door. We have to cut budgets, so that means you're out. Like, bloody hell. Because that's the other thing people don't realize, mate, is as you say, unlike every other sport and even games like CSGO, there is no other game in town than Riot. And so if they don't want to hire you, you could be the biggest caster in the world. Like they could fight, if everyone who thinks that Captain Flowers is so wonderful, if they fire him tomorrow and he can't work in Valorant or League of Legends, where's he going to work then, guys? Rainbow Six? You're not going to be watching him. The joke is even you wouldn't watch him if you're his fan, because you're his fan when he does League of Legends. I get it. Whereas if you have to realize, even things like the UFC that has like a full monopoly, dude, there's other organizations. There's like Bellator and One FC. You can go if you're a massive name and you will get hired by the rival. In fact, that's even the leverage as to why the UFC has to keep you if you're the biggest guy, because you won't take a viewer base, but you'll make their product better, won't you? In League of Legends, the real problem is this, and this was another reason, by the way, why, the thing that annoys me the most about when the evil people buy into esports is people actually think like the evil guys, like some Scrooge McDuck guy with a big vault of money, but he's just willingly giving the money out. You don't become super rich as an evil person by giving out money willy-nilly. It's why there's those famous scenarios where people are like, wow, why doesn't this rich guy spend more? That's how he became rich. Like his mentality is, I don't give money away unless I have to. So what the problem is, they always actually do the opposite. They always lure you in initially, like, we're going to spend more money and give you more. And then what happens eventually is they go, time to run it like a business, which is what apparently Tencent did a couple of years ago. And when you run it like a business, well, remember, esports loses money. So that means you're going to immediately crush the margins. You're going to say, who do we know? Not only, here's the other thing. You've already seen it play out. You're not only going to say, who don't we need? You're going to get really cynical. You're going to go, who do we need but could work 3 out of 5 days instead of 5? You'll start doing that as well. Or then you go like this. This happens already in the other games. You play them off against each other. So you go, oh, you want to ask for a higher rate for this event? We're not going to use you very much. And then for the next one, the implication to the other guy is, you even say it to him maybe. But the thing is, you were so reasonable with your rate. Like, we're very happy to keep working. If you don't know, these guys are so scummy with the euphemisms. They play out on the, like, familial elements when they need to. And then when they don't do, by the way, like this, the joke is they do just come in with the fake rolling, like, well, here's your parting gift. Thanks for your service, Pastry Time. Now you may retire. It's like, retire? I hadn't planned on. Well, I will now be effective. That's the thing. I know what you mean, Monty. When you read that word effectively, that's a dagger to the heart, isn't it? Because you're all going, it just means he's not. No, what he means by that is there's nothing else to do if he can't work for Riot Games. So in League of Legends, yes, he is effectively being retired in the same way as fucking Old Yeller was effectively retired from being a dog.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
reference is a bit dated. Okay,
that's true. No, it's a good reference. It's a good reference. It's also just one of those things where this is where the monopoly in the Riot Games ecosystem is really harmful to casters, right? It's extremely harmful because in traditional sports, all of the networks would be fighting over, for example, in the NFL in America, right? Different networks have different broadcasts, and like ESPN has Monday Night Football, and Amazon has Thursday Night Football. There's a different broadcaster. I think it's Fox who does Sunday Night Football. So the casters get big deals to move around. So famously this year, Al Michaels, who is one of the most legendary play-by-play commentators of all time in American sports, across several sports actually, he moved from his traditional partner on Sunday night, Chris Collinsworth, and he got basically bought by Amazon to do Thursday Night Football. And then Mike Tirico, who you might recognize from doing the Olympics for NBC. It's NBC, sorry, because it's Mike Tirico was NBC, and he stayed on NBC, and that's where Chris Collinsworth is. Anyway, NBC does Sunday Night Football. So Mike Tirico, who's also another great play-by-play commentator, but he's hosting the Olympics now. So that's where you might recognize him from. He's with Chris Collinsworth. And so they're making a bunch of moves, but these people get massive guaranteed multi-year deals in order to do this because they're competing with each other. And famously, ESPN has had a garbage Monday night product for a long time. People hated the casters. There's a lot of criticism leveled at ESPN. And guys, there are examples of this in esports. And I've discussed this before, but you can go back in history and see what happens when two different caster pairs are casting the same product. So famously, in the first early days of StarCraft, or the early days of StarCraft 2 and WCS, when Blizzard came in and fucked everything up, basically, when I was in Korea with DOTA, they basically said, okay, OGN and GOM TV, you guys can cast the same StarCraft games. And of course, it was me and Doa competing against Tasteless and Artosis. So Tasteless and Artosis got 95% of the viewers, right? Even though sometimes they were casting remotely because the games were happening in the OGN studio. And then the exact same thing happened when Riot came in and divided the broadcast between SPO TV and OGN for League of Legends, which was the OGN broadcast with like Doa, me, Achilleos, Papa Smithy was getting 95% of the viewership, even though half the games were actually in arena. So we were doing a remote cast from like a closet at OGN. We had 95% of the viewership compared to SPO TV, who had, casters that became good later on, but were relatively unknown at the time. And so this situation just shows you how powerful that draw can be for casters. But when you have a monopoly, it doesn't matter who your casters are. And Riot knows this. They could fire everybody and replace them with bums, and people would still watch it. In fact, I suspect that their next move is probably going to be, at least for LCS, to open up co-streaming more and really push down the cost of casters on their own broadcast, give casters co-streaming rights. And then, because that budget is what's shared with the teams, right? So they have to push that budget down, which is why it's so funny to see LCS or Riot doing things like hiring Tyler One to do hype or Lil Nas X to do a world song, because that comes from a different budget, the marketing budget.
Yes, exactly.
That isn't shared with the teams. So there's a lot of pressure from the franchise teams. We need to reduce broadcast budget so the teams get more money, because we need to be more profitable, right? And as we've discussed on this show many times, Riot hides the real profit because they won't release the information about how successful the marketing for skins is from the LCS. So they just hide that money. And so the only revenue that they have is coming in from the sponsorships, basically, on the broadcast. So, it really is, I think, pretty insidious and a bad way to treat casters, and also just makes casters worthless, even though they have dedicated 10 years to the game. And, I can only imagine how frustrating it is to be a caster who's working on these shows and see co-streamers making literally 10x as much money as you do, and you've been doing this for a decade. Like, because the money's there, not going to you.
Like, look, I'm not hating on those guys making the millions of dollars. Obviously, I'm on your side. I think the casters should make more. But the other reason that you'd be really pissed off if you're these best casters in the world is because, remember, some of those, like, let's be real, the whole appeal of those core streams, if it's not Dom and LS, if it's someone like Doublelift, etc., was the notion that, like, it's just because Doublelift's really famous. Like, some of those ones they're on, sometimes him and Sneaky and Meteos are just sort of sitting there saying nothing, going, dude, can't believe that's like, caster can't do that. Like, he has to be fully pro. He has to research the game. By the way, everyone will be right up a caster's arse if he gets something wrong in the game or doesn't comment correctly or misses, like, who does the stopwatch or who hit the fucking Baron. Like, that's the other reason you'd be mad triggered if you were doing it. You're working way harder than these guys are.
Well, also, like, it's especially annoying because Doublelift in particular, like, falsifies history constantly, not intentionally. He just has a really shitty memory. He just has a really shitty memory, guys. And his perspective on things is often, I would say, from being at some of the things he's talking about, very inaccurate in my eyes. Very inaccurate.
Well, Doublelift's one of those guys where I've actually told Doublelift, like, to his face, things about his own life, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, that is how it happened." Like, well, you just said what? How do I know your life better than you? You know what I mean? That life, I know.
So anyway, the whole situation right now, I think, is really grim, and you could just shake your head and say, well, that's just how businesses work. But at the same time, again, Riot is hiding the actual profits, right? They're hiding the profits that they're making from the skins, from the teams, from their partners. And so that is the thing causing this scenario. And their monopoly is causing wage fixing across every region of League of Legends. So you just hit a ceiling in terms of your rates, can't go any higher, right? Meanwhile, you watch these co-streamers make millions of dollars a year. And by the way, do you get co-streaming rights? Oh, no, you don't. You don't get co-streaming rights to the LCS. You don't get it at all. So they don't give it to you because they know you might make more money, and then you would leave. You would just leave. It's actually too good in many ways.
And here's the thing, though. Now, here's a guy. No, whatever. I was just referencing Chris Collinsworth earlier. No, what I would say is this, though. I would never recommend anyone do what I'm about to not say, which is, I think if someone out there did feel aggrieved about, I don't know, anything Riot's done, there's certain things a few years ago, spinning the old cogs, you know, what I would not suggest they do is somehow get some of that data. Again, don't do this. This would be really fucked up. It'd almost be like corporate espionage. Don't get any of that data and leak it to like a credible journalist. Because if you did that, like, first of all, I could potentially be implicated if I had have told you to do that. If I said it over Twitch, which I wouldn't, then that'd probably break the TOS. And actually, even the journalists have to be very careful how we receive that information. So all I'm saying is don't do that. If anyone out there is out there thinking that, I'm really aggrieved and that would be a good way to get back. Listen, in a hypothetical world, it probably would be, but don't do it, okay? I'm just saying don't do it. Oh, shit, I had some like lemon pulp or something in my eye.
Yeah. It's okay. Understandable. Yeah, I mean, I'm just really sick of it.
That would tear the industry open. Can you imagine if those numbers dropped? Because if you haven't guessed right, I'm pretty sure Monte agrees. The premise is, I'm imagining they're probably like 10x what they claim they are, or the ballpark they put them in, because they have no reason to tell the truth except if they're honest people, and it's Riot. So
yeah. Look, Riot knows all those. By the way, guys, when you link your little account to Worlds for drops, guess what they're looking for? They're like, oh, wow, this person's watching every game of League of Legends from Worlds. Oh, the average amount they've spent in this game is 10x of a non-esports viewer. That's how they justify their esports expenditures, guys, because they know it makes you spend more money. Oh, yeah, Faker, Faker doesn't play with skins. So we'll go, oh, yeah, Jojo Pion just played with this skin, and all of a sudden, in the 3 hours after the game, the skins we did thousands of those skin sales. Wow, look at all that money! I wonder where it came from. Not surely just a coincidence that Jojo just played that game in front of 300,000 people, and the skin sales went through the roof. It's all this stuff. So I'm sick of it, but at the same time, there's nothing that can be done, because until intellectual property laws change so that other people can create leagues around these games like you can do in traditional sports, then this is just going to be the outcome, is the total monopoly, wage fixing, bad for the audience approach that Riot takes.
And by the way, before everyone does that thing that they love to do, I've noticed they do this to you in League in casting, and the same way they do it to me and Richard Lewis in like CSGO, which is we are like reviled and treated like scum, like shit on the bottom of people's boots with any other topic. But then when people do corrupt shit, or there's like some evil regime that might murder you if you speak it, they go, hey, what the hell, Richard and Thorin, can't you dive in front of this bullet? And then here's the reason why we're not going to do it. Because in this analogy, right, as you'll find out later this week, we are trying to do it like the Matrix. We're trying to be like Morpheus, right? We're leaving the Matrix. But look, it's good news. Yeah. If you're legit, we will come back to free you from the Matrix. You're like, why don't you become like Agent Smith's rival and join the Matrix? Like, no, I've left the Matrix. Like, because of you guys never supported it, I had to leave the Matrix. So I'm definitely not going to join back into the corporate system now, am I? Like, what would the point of that be? So we won't be doing that, by the way. I know everyone's going to go, but you guys could leave. Yeah, no, A, we couldn't, and B, we wouldn't. There you go.
Well, also, frankly, to use the Matrix analogy, so many of these people too are they'll come to us and they'll be like, man, the Matrix really sucks. The Matrix really sucks. I'm thinking about leaving the Matrix. And then you're like, okay, here you go. Here's the red pill, and here's the blue pill. Pick which one you want. They're like, but that steak really tastes good. And then they just walk back into the Matrix. I'm like, okay, you had your chance. And this was the decision that you made after complaining about the Matrix. And look, Zion may not be, may not be the gleaming city of these developers, but at least we'll be free in our dingy ass machine city.
The thing is, though, Monty, it's actually your analogy is apt, but you could extend it further, because remember what he also said when he was eating the steak. He was like, "I want to be someone famous, rich, like an actor or something." It's like, look, do you know where the LCS is based, guys? Like, like if you only knew how on the nose that is. I know, exactly.
They got that rich. Well, not even that rich, because that's the thing, is they can't get rich because there's no competition in the marketplace. Oh boy. Well, by the time this episode comes out, we may actually have launched the new brand. That's going to be happening tomorrow, which is the day that this episode is coming out. So you guys can look forward to that. It'll be a good time. It'll be a good time. Are there any other important things before we talk about the games? Gen.G jerseys, did you see those?
No, what was that?
Oh my God, Thorin. Hang on. Let me
unfortunately,
get your real-time reaction to this, actually.
I do remember when, like, the other, because people are going to get confused. If you remember, Ashley actually, like, incorrectly said she don't know the jersey where it had those sort of like rugby top type ones, but that was apparently just a different jersey. Like, they've just revealed the new Worlds one, you mean?
Yeah, here you go. Maybe I'm just a boomer now. I mean, I am a boomer now, but
they actually did like an actual like catwalk show and everything. Okay.
Well, a seizure-inducing one, perhaps.
Oh, it's not like FaZe Clan style editing, yeah, where you just like, I can't see anything. Please get the lights out of my eyes. Oh, stop shining it. Please, can I have some water?
Just look at the tiger. Oh wait, maybe you actually can't see it this whole video. Hang on. You can't actually see it. I just watched
right,
it
is that
again.
the short version?
No, that's the whole version. But here's some pictures, so you can actually see the tiger, because it's important to look at the tiger here.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. That looks like something that the Gen.G CEO's daughter gave him as a picture. Like, Daddy, I made this with crayons. And he goes, instead of putting it on the fridge, he puts it on the jersey. Like, what's that? That's mental, mate. What?
That was my joke.
You've done the dude. Here's the joke. Like, you've actually done a North from CS:GO. If you don't know the reference, North had a whole imagery, right? That was almost like a Norse thing. It was from Denmark, and then they did a rebrand where it was like this goofy dragon, like, oh no. And everyone was just mocking him, like, why have you done that? You made yourself laughable. That's what they've done with this tiger here. What the hell? You could make it so cool as well, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could make a really good tiger. That was actually my joke on Twitter, was that my toddler son drew the tiger.
There you go. Right. That's what it looks like.
They said they in collaboration with a Korean traditional artist. So I figured.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Technically could be true. That's true.
So yeah, it like doesn't even look like it's supposed to be on the uniform. It looks like somebody like took a black Sharpie and just drew it on the front of the uniform. But the sad thing is, we're gonna have to watch Gen.G win Worlds in this fucking jersey, and then it's just gonna be around forever, mocking us for the entirety of history as they lift the cup in this thing. I just don't understand how this got through. Like, the Seoul Dynasty logo, the Overwatch League logo that they have is so good. They could have done their awesome like black and gold theme. It looks like a pumpkin with a cat with a tiger face drawn on it. Maybe it's for Halloween because it's of October. I don't know.
The problem as well is, to be fair, I am colorblind, so this might just be me, but I also find the contrast of like gray or whatever that is with like orange really like
terrible.
A bit sickening, you know? It's kind of a bit makes me feel like nauseated or something, you know?
That's not good. I don't know how this happened. I do not know how this happened.
What does it say in Korean on the bottom? Does anyone know? What's that on the bottom of the jersey at the back?
Let me look real quick.
Maybe like fighting or something.
Out of it.
Do they have a slogan for Gen.G? I don't know what theirs would be. Wonder what it says.
It says Esports, part of it. It says Gen.G Esports.
Oh,
Korean.
fair enough then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was just the English word esports spelled out in Korean. So yeah, that's why.
Mate, almost every single reply on Twitter is just people flaming him. Oh, mate, this is if we could show this on stream, this actually has cracked me up because this is so funny as a meme. Is there any way we can show this on stream?
Yeah, Edric can get it on there.
This is actually fire.
That is super funny.
That's just so well done, isn't it? I love it. I love the memery. Because that was that famous one where they redrew it, if you don't know the story yet.
And that's why you watch on YouTube or Spotify, guys. If you're listening to the podcast right now, if you were on Spotify instead, you'd actually be able to see this. I'll drop the link. Andrew is going to bring it up, though. Our producer is going to bring it up. Just give him a second.
Just chuck it in the middle.
It's too good.
They've nailed it, whoever did that. That's for sure. Because you're right, the old Tiger looks fucking banging on the left, mate. Looks really sick, doesn't it?
I mean, look, they've had a bunch of really good logos. That's what's so confusing about this, because Gen.G normally has done extremely well with a lot of their logos. Like the Seoul Dynasty logo is fucking incredible. There it is on your screen now. So you guys can see the black and gold tiger versus the
that's also so unfortunate
tiger
as well. Because if he could go back in time now, knowing what happened with Overwatch League, you would gladly call your Overwatch League like Gen.G or something. And the League of Legends team, Seoul Dynasty, that's a fucking sick name, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Sadly, you burned that on Overwatch, haven't you? So it's too late for that now.
I mean, there's a lot of problems with Gen.G. First off, it's cut from the same cloth as like Gamers 2, which is supposed to be like Generation Gamers, which is just objectively terrible. Also, Gen.G in Korean sounds vaguely like Jaji, which is vagina. So like that's not a great.
Well, to be fair, they are a big fan of pussy. So it's even their logo in some ways. I know. It's a bit too on the nose, isn't it? A bit too on the nose for me, if I'm being a massive pussy. Yeah, great. Maybe they were a big fan of The Sopranos, big pussy. One of the best characters, wasn't he?
So yeah, the Gen.G brand, they could have done better. By the way, guys, remember esports teams. I know you think you have brand value, but it is never too late to change your brand. It is never too late. So many of these brands are garbage. Like G2, for fuck's sake, rebrand right now. Do it. Rebrand right now. You can keep the same tone that you had if you can without Carlos. I think that's going to be very difficult to keep that tone. But if you can manage it, now's a great time to move away from your nonsense name of G2 and your weird samurai aesthetic that you never use. You never use to do anything with. Like, you could do cool samurai stuff, but you don't. So do it now. Do it now.
I have a quick question for you, just as an aside. What I actually should have asked you this privately, but I'll see what you think publicly. What did you actually think? Because there's two people whose reaction I want to know on this. One is Richard Lewis from the reporting side, and the other one is you. What do you actually think about literally knowing the day that they shutter the fucking doors on Overwatch, the game, when they bring Overwatch 2 out? Because it's just over. Yeah. If people don't know, it's been and gone if you missed it. Like, Overwatch is done and Overwatch 2. By the way, spoiler, Overwatch 2 is basically Overwatch 1, slightly different. But yeah, but they are, in theory, they are closing the other game down, even though they've poured all the skins and everything. What do you think? What were your thoughts when you heard this?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, so let's be very clear. I want Overwatch League to be successful because it is the only thing that stands against Riot's tyranny. As we discussed earlier, like obviously I was able to leverage a very good deal out of Blizzard, and also it increased the casting rates of people within the Riot ecosystem as well, because Overwatch League was trying to get people from Riot and like from League of Legends, and it was succeeding in the case of like Crumbs, me, Doa. We talked to some of the other casters as well. So there were real opportunities. And so it increased Riot casters' rates and made it much more profitable to be a League of Legends caster. And so Overwatch 2 and Overwatch League not doing well is very, very bad for the ecosystem, because the more major publishers we have with successful esports, the better off the people who are not at the developers are going to be, which I think is very important. The better off the teams are going to be, the better off the casters are going to be, etc. So I think what's important about this is that it's free to play, and Overwatch had a pretty strong player base even to the very end days of Overwatch 1, like very strong.
that's an aspect that's always misunderstood because people conflate the esport with the game, Monty. When me, Richard Lewis, and other people have said Overwatch League wasn't well run and was failing and viewing, understand the game made billions of dollars. Like, it was an incredibly successful venture. I'm not surprised they did Overwatch 2. And the premise also goes, what they learned is why it's free to play now. It's just like Riot. They realized, who cares about sales if you make all the money from the in-game items? So they were making billions from the in-game items. So that's why it's actually totally logical there would be another version of the game. Like, the Overwatch League is separate from Overwatch the game.
Yeah, I think and the problem with Overwatch, one of the big problems was the devs just stopped developing it, basically. And so they weren't adding new characters. Basically, they got trapped in an old business model by selling the game and having loot boxes instead of battle passes like we see in Fortnite or Apex, or I mean, even League of Legends now, I guess, sort of has that system. And those are much more fun systems, in my opinion, and they're a lot better. And it allows you to continuously make money while iterating on developing the game and releasing things, like knowing when your release cycles are coming up. But because they were working on this and PvE that we've never seen, it really is, it's interesting to see if this will work. The free to play is going to be huge because now it's no longer gated behind paying $40 for the game itself. So if that increases the competitive player base, then I think there's an opportunity for Overwatch League to be resuscitated. Whether that will happen or not, for those of you who don't know, Overwatch League, it's been a solid, like, upper level tier 2 esport. They have a pretty solid, like, 50,000 concurrent viewers on the stream. So there is a way to run it, but it's not like 300K like it used to be when I first joined Overwatch League. And also, I think 5v5 is better. I think having 5v5 is better. There's fewer players, allows you to have more star players, less to keep track of within the game as well.
Yes, that helps as well, exactly, for the spectator angle. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. What actually was the scenario of that? Because we'll go back to League of Legends in a second. Obviously, it's a fucking playing episode. Calm down, right? But the thing I want to ask was this. That was also one thing that they did obviously under-deliver on. Because if you remember in the first few years when we were doing Oversight, if you don't remember, guys, Monte left, so we stopped doing someone in Insight, and we made a show called Oversight, and we just did a show in Overwatch. It's why it's always hilarious. People tell me, like, what do you know about Overwatch? Like, well, I did the show in the whole fucking scene for the first 2 years, but what do I know, right? So one of the things about that was they always promised, obviously, they would bring out loads more of the, did they call them heroes? Are they called heroes in? Well, yeah, they said they would bring out loads of heroes, like just like League, but obviously they got nowhere close to 100 or whatever. How many more did they bring out? It was only a couple, was it? Wasn't like 3 or 4 or something ridiculous.
I mean, they didn't bring any out for like the last 3 years. That was the problem.
Oh, holy shit! So actually, the ones I'm thinking of are like the last ones that came out, like Brigitte and stuff.
Yeah. So
what? That's mental. Because I've watched Overwatch League in years now, obviously. Yeah.
So no, they basically released 3 more at launch of Overwatch 2. But they haven't released any in years. So that's the big problem, right? It was very, the transition was botched. Let's just put it that way. And I think that was part of the reason that the esports scene slowed down, because, like it or not, most people watch esports because they want to get better at the game. And if they're not introducing new content for people to learn how to get better, then they are not going to watch the esport. And yep. So that's that. That's our Overwatch League segment. But I do think that there is hope, at least for Overwatch League, and I hope there is. Like, the last thing I want is for Overwatch League to die, especially because now they booted out all the shit people. Like, they actually cleansed the Overwatch League. So I really want it to succeed now. I really want it to succeed at this point in time. I think there are some good people who are running it.
Imagine a big game dev doing some fucked up stuff and then actually cleaning house and firing people who did things out. That would almost be something that showed remorse or contrition, wouldn't it? Not just saying the words.
Or paying people a bunch of money, hush money.
And then trying to get that sort of argued down by doing sabotage and that, innit? And not the good Beastie Boys type. All my references from the 90s. We established this.
That's right. Yeah. That's a great song. Also a great music video. So let's talk about play-ins, I guess.
We just start. Here's the thing, you know, something Insight. Let's just go straight in the main topic. Mad Lions, this team has just never won a best of 5 ever, including against EG, and now they're not going to be in the real Worlds and top 16.
They did beat Saigon Buffalo.
Oh, they did. Oh, sorry, they did win a best of 5 technically. Yeah, my bad.
They did technically win a best of 5 at long last.
You go.
But I think what was What was interesting about Mad Lions is that, so first off, you do have to give them some amount of credit because they were extremely close to beating DRX. And there were things to like about Mad Lions. Like, I think they just completely ran out of gas and were absolutely awful against CG. But they weren't awful for the entire play-ins, guys.
Oh, no.
They almost beat DRX with like a really cool strategy that relied on, they picked the Bel'Veth into them. So they ended up picking the Bel'Veth a bunch of times after that. But they selected the Bel'Veth, and then they wanted to, they counterpicked in the top lane the Camille with the Mordekaiser. They did an early invade, which set Pyosik really far behind. And El Yo-Yo was basically able, it was like a set play that they used to get the invade, to get El Yo-Yo an advantage. And the pressure from the Mordekaiser in top lane and the roaming from the Vex allowed them to really prioritize Herald, which you want to do with Bel'Veth. So it felt like the first, 10 minutes of that game were just really well scripted by Mad Lions with a really, really solid plan coming in. And unfortunately, what ended up happening, as you guys know, is they were very far ahead, and they started a Baron when Deft was on Sivir, and there was a Yuumi in the game, and then Sivir Yuumi things happened where Sivir runs into a Baron pit, ricochets everybody, kills everybody, and then the game ends.
Almost like that's the champion you don't really want to start a Baron against, some would say.
Maybe you could argue that if you have a bunch of low range carries like Bel'Veth and Mordekaiser, that maybe you don't want to do that when Deft can kite you, and Deft is one of the best Sivir players in League of Legends history, and he's being powered up by a Yuumi. So it was a bad call, but I don't think it invalidates how good the rest of the game was for Mad Lions. And it gave me a lot of hope for Mad Lions, honestly. And then I think that hope looked pretty good as well when they played against Saigon Buffalo. I think it was a relatively clean series from them. And we got to see the Bel'Veth again. We got to see the Bel'Veth carries again. And
Do you
then
think that will be a major champion in the world's main event?
No.
That was just a one-off. Okay.
I think it can work. I think it can work. It wouldn't surprise me to see a player like Canyon pick it up. Maybe Kanavi. Pyosik was actually there are rumors about Pyosik's Bel'Veth being very good, which is why in LCK we saw in the last best of 3 that we saw between DRX and DAMWON, Canyon first picked it in the first game on blue side to take it away from Pyosik. We can only assume that there was some wacky shit happening in the scrims, because it was like the first week of availability. Like, why the fuck would you first pick it on blue side unless you were trying to take it away? Or there was some bizarre scrim priority on this pick. And there have been rumors that Pyosik is good on it. Yeah, and Kanavi and Canyon.
The joke is you could have left that on it. They would just be rumors that he's good. Because right now, his own team don't even think he's good, maybe.
Well, he wasn't good at Sejwadi in that game. He missed all his ults. In the game against Mad Lions, he was terrible. So yeah, I think players like Kanavi and Canyon may show up with it. So there are other fringe cases of junglers who may want to use it at Worlds, and it could be good. I think you see the strength of it if you have pushing lanes and you can get priority and farm up and play around your jungler, which again is something that DAMWON and JDG will probably be happy to do, given the current meta. Then there are really good opportunities to use Bel'Veth. So I don't think it'll be the most meta pick, but I think some people will pick it up. Some people.
By the way, even though obviously everyone's going to meme on almost all the players in Mad Lions, I actually do think El Yo-Yo looked pretty good most of the time.
Oh, he looked great.
He had some Smurf games, didn't he?
Yeah, there was. It's hard to read too much into this final because it felt like Mad Lions just never even showed up. It felt like they just never showed up to play today at any point in time. And it looked like they had basically mentally surrendered from the first game. Niski was really uncharacteristically bad. When I saw their first draft, I thought to myself, okay, well, Unforgiven's going to be on the Draven. That's been a pretty common ban, both in playoffs and then at Worlds even against Unforgiven. So must be doing some damage in scrims for people to know this and not want him to have it. And, they play the Rumble, Vi, Silas, Draven, Leona. And this composition needs to get early advantages, right? And if you're picking Rumble, I can only assume that the purpose of this is to fight over early objectives and to go after Herald and, fight around 1 to 2 items, get these big leads with the Vi, pick somebody off. But in game number 1, probably the most crucial juncture of that game was the first Rift Herald spawn when Unforgiven just stayed in bot lane and they got a kill in mid lane by using the Vi ultimate and having Leona and Silas there as well. But this was while Inspired was doing the Herald because the Rumble was pushed in, right? And so they gave up the Herald for free. Unforgiven stayed in the bot lane, got 1 plate. Inspired had enough time to recall, right? And EG's bot lane had enough time to walk bot, Inspired walk from base, and killed Unforgiven while he was alone, pushed up in bot lane. So they got the Herald, and it had enough time to recall and rotate all the way back down to the bot lane and shut down the Draven. And I thought that they were going to play towards the Rumble and play towards those objectives or try and stack up early dragons. They didn't do those things. Okay, so that game doesn't work. Sometimes you just take a flyer. This wasn't the strategy that they played against Saigon Buffalo. They played Bel'Veth, they played Hecarim, right, in that previous series. And so they were really seeing success by farming up Elyoya instead of having him play Vi. So we fast forward to the next game. Okay, Elyoya's on Trundle. It's another kind of like early game jungler that you can gank with even faster at level 2 if you're Trundle. So I think to myself, maybe they're going to play through the Draven this time because they have an Ornn in top lane. No, they don't do that. Instead, they try and make plays in the top lane for the Ornn. And they play. So the first game, I thought they would play towards the Rumble and power up the Draven that way. The second game, I thought they would play through the bot lane and power up the Draven that way. They didn't do any of these things. So at this point in time, I'm like, why the fuck are you picking this Draven? Like, you don't want to move Draven to the fight, and you don't want to move your jungler to fight with Draven. So
it's like they just did it because he plays Draven or something. That's it.
But it's like the misread on how to play Draven was very severe from Mad Lions. And in 2 different looks, they did the wrong thing both times, which is pretty incredible. And also, the bot lane, like you can't play Draven Leona or Draven Alistar and then fucking like lose to Sivir Yuumi. And what was even more egregious about that game, Thorin, is like the fail dive that they had, which is that Jojo Pion was playing this weird set counterpick to Silas in the mid lane, right? And EG legitimately played that game extremely well. I think EG was really good in game 2 in particular because they were covering their lanes well. Inspired was great in that series, by the way. Inspired was great. Vulcan was pretty low-key good in terms of the positioning on the map. And Mad Lions, it's like once they made a decision to dive the tier 1 turret in bot lane, even though they saw Jojo Pion and Vulcan coming back from mid lane, they just continued with the dive and then fed the Sivir and Yuumi. And at that point, if you're feeding Sivir and Yuumi as Draven Alistar that early into the game, you're just going to have a terrible time. He's going to have a terrible time. Like, Kaiser was bad. Fucking Niski was getting clapped by Jojo. The synergy between Niski and Elyoya was super bad. Like, Niski was all-inning when Inspired, or when Elyoya couldn't be there and Inspired was there. It was terrible. I mean,
it's forgetting someone, as Jesus says to people having premarital sex.
Armin didn't do anything.
They won 6 games at Worlds. 4 of them he was on Nah. Like, that's not a meme anymore, guys. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, this isn't like season 4. You can't only play like 1 or 2 champions, mate. And some of these are against playing teams. Like, it's really nothing. Because remember, this was the whole narrative with Armor. The whole narrative was, he only shows up in the playoffs like he's some sort of fucking rogue figure who just comes in, like rolls in like, ha, ha, ha. Oh, now does the game matter? Well, there was no playoffs in spring. They lost every fucking playoff match in summer, and now he's just bombed out of Worlds. Like, this is really embarrassing, mate. Because the problem I have with that team is, right, remember, Niski is the MVP of the LEC. The other 3 players not called Armor were voted the best player in their role. So you can't now, by the way, spin it around and do what I would do. Like, here's the thing. I can give you the ultimate immediate excuse for Unforgiven. He's a rookie. He's a rookie. He's only ever played one playoffs in his life, and this was his second big tournament ever. Like, look, fucking Perks failed internationally. Caps failed internationally. Like, it can happen. But the problem is, like, we're putting these players to our high standard. They're supposed to be a championship roster, and you're not even in the real tournament. And let's be real, EG played well, but everyone's been bagging on them all summer long, going, oh, the LEC would be all these teams. You remember all those comments? Would they even be a playoff team? All that, well, they just 3-0'd one of the teams that was literally the second best in the split on the regular part, obviously.
Yeah, and I think they looked good while doing it. But part of this too was it was clear in the what I didn't like about what Mad Lions did was they played a series against Saigon Buffalo the day before with entirely different strategies. And yes, the Belveth was banned, guys, but the Hecarim was just falling through these drafts, just falling all the way to the bottom.
And he smurfed on that early as well when he's playing.
Yeah,
that would have been sick to play,
So you played your own style that they showed they could almost beat DRX with, by the way, like playing a style where your lanes are somewhat self-sufficient but can get some priority, and then it's Elyoya's jungle pathing that is dominating how you play the map. And in these games, what we see from Elyoya is Vi and Trundle to start things off. And I guess the thought process was this, Thorn, if I had to guess. It's that they see Cowrie and they say, okay, this guy's brand new. He's not used to this level of pressure. So we're just going to go after him with Draven lanes and early game junglers and try and just crazily snowball the game. But to Cowrie's credit, he did really well. And I think if you compare him to Danny's laning, he looks a lot better, considering that Danny and Vulcan were very weak in lane. Cowrie seems more self-sufficient. I think Vulcan was able to roam mid more than times that I've seen EG play recently. It was more reminiscent of Danny in his earlier days where they kind of just used to leave him alone.
Yes.
Cowrie was kind of filling that role now, playing a little bit more passively. And he has a better champion pool, certainly has a wider champion pool than Danny. I think it would be shocking to see Danny on this roster again.
I would say he's the better ADC right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were some mistakes. Like, we can't look at Cowrie and say, oh, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, sometimes he would just randomly die in fights with like all his summoners up, or like he actually, especially in game 1, got caught out in the jungle in a really unfortunate timing that kind of made that game probably take 5 or 10 minutes longer than it should have, because it gave Mad Lions kind of a slight angle back into a game that was basically won. So some of his positioning stuff, especially around vision in the mid and late game, still needs work, but his laning's a lot better and his champion pool's a lot better. And most of the time,
you don't have to play around him all the time, like you said.
Most of the time, his team fighting was pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would probably take a flyer on him at this point in time, especially since he stepped up so big, like flying back from Europe or Turkey or wherever he was, and immediately getting inserted into a stadium event in playoffs and then coming to Worlds. That's crazy to see how impressive he's been under those circumstances.
The problem is, though, and I didn't create this problem, evil geniuses create this problem. Their messaging around Danny stressed that he is family. They didn't even say like he's one of our favorite employees. They stressed that he is family. Well, I'm sorry, if he's family and you really care about mental health awareness, then anytime he's ready to come back, he gets the starting spot back, right? What am I missing here? I didn't create that standard. I didn't set that up as the position. By the way, the whole reason you message like he's family like that is because like, we really care about him. You know, we're going to support him. And I was like, you can't then be like, well, actually, I'm just going to get a new son. Like, that doesn't work, does it? That analogy will always be fucking gold, mate. You can't just do that. Well, you can't. You'd just be pretty evil if you did, and not in the way they're trying to build, obviously. Again, backdoored it into being evil.
Yeah, they're disowning their family. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he will be back. Maybe that's what they want to do. But I think the rational move here from a performance standpoint is to put Cowrie in. And then, I don't know if Danny's going to be cut out for doing professional League of Legends
or being a professional academy team or something and swap the positions, and then see how he does after a year, then see if he's ready to come back or whatever. Because that's the sad thing is they already were playing like a very specific way around him. But like when he could get through like laning phase and get the fight, he could be really good in the team fights, obviously at times. Like that's what all the highlights are from. So like you don't want to abandon them entirely, especially if this is hopefully not going to be an ongoing problem, whatever he's suffering from.
Yeah. For sure. Maybe it's something that, we're just speculating. We don't know, or I don't know. You might know. I don't know what's going on, but Hopefully that can be resolved, and maybe the academy path is the way back for Danny as he slowly introduces himself into League of Legends. I did think he had some very bright spots, so it'd be sad to lose another piece of what could be potentially rising NA talent, but it really looked like it was getting to him watching his player cams in some of those games towards the end. So that's it with Mad Lions. I think EG played pretty well. The other story was obviously some pretty close games and even a win from Detonation Focus Me versus RNG. A lot of people have said, oh yeah, RNG, potentially a dark horse for this tournament.
Win the whole thing, right?
Yep.
People have them as a sleeper. Yeah.
They were pretty underwhelming, I have to say. Like, they were good, but they were not as good as we thought they would be. And
but luckily they got hold, because obviously they're not in NA, but they're in the Americas in general. So Bjergsen actually, through the post, sent them that device he has that the CIA made in the 70s that he presses and mind controls everyone to int into. But the problem is, Bjergsen's smart. He sets it at like a 3 out of 10, and it's only when he really needs it. The idiots at RNG, they set it at 11, didn't they? Like, if you saw that last game, that was some of the worst like win trading I've ever seen. What was that? Because we were watching it like, this is that's like they were speedrunning the airport for real, was it, that last game?
So what was so funny about that game is, like, both teams are setting up dives cross map. Like, you see these waves stacking, right? And it was similar to the dive that we talked about with Mad Lions, Mad Lions in game 2 of their series. This is game 4. And RNG, breathes on his famous Fiora. They're trying to get him ahead. They dive the top lane with Wei and Xiaohu and Breathe. They get the kill onto Evi's Gnar. But the wave isn't quite there yet on the bottom side. And so even though RNG has 2 TPs up, right? And you're diving a turret. So remember, you can still TP to that turret prior to 14 minutes. Xiaohu basically on Lissandra is allowed to just TP into the bot lane because the dive comes later when they commit to it. They don't even kill Ming, so it's like Steel, Utapon, and Harp, and then they just all die. They just all die to Gala, Ming, and Xiaohu. And Breathe just recalls and TPs mid lane and catches the wave and then walks back top. It was actually a really good play by RNG, that's the kind of macro from RNG that gives you hope, because it's like, oh, we got our dive off first. We have 2 TPs. Breathe. They communicate very quickly, like Breathe recall. Xiaohu's going to go TPs, Lissandra, you can CC them under the turret. We'll get them. And then we're not going to lose any minions because Breeze's going to TP mid and walk top. Like, it was a really good play by RNG. So I don't want to take that away from them.
What I like about them, by the way, everyone, people still ride that narrative from like season 3 that like all Chinese teams are just diving and bloody, they're so reckless and playing so silly. Like, RNG is a mad cerebral team. It's one of the best things about them. They actually are the more Korean style of League of Legends, fully enough.
Yeah, for sure. They're very much a macro team, and you could see it in some of their calls. Like, they are good at doing this stuff, and it was unfortunate because I thought, Detonation Focus Me did extremely well in that first game. I thought they played their composition well. They got some really serious early game advantages. I don't know how seriously RNG was taking the series, but the rest of the games were less close. Let's just put it that way. They were less close for the most part. With the 4th game, just Detonation Focus Me, it seemed like they already had 1 foot out the door onto the airplane, leaving Mexico City and heading back to Japan. So
the cool thing for me, and what I hope continues on, is if you think about all those past episodes with Nymera when he was hyping up the old lineups of Detonation Focus Me, it was always centered around the fact that Arya is like an underrated Korean midlet. He's not even in the team. He's been off in Korea for ages now, guys, and they actually completely again rebuilt. Like, they're obviously doing a good job putting this squad together, mate. Like, every single international tournament, they're at a minimum in with a chance to win a BO1. Like, it's actually, they've added like a little bit of extra spice to the tournament.
It's also fun too, because Nymera told me he was also on some of the watch parties on my stream, and he said that Utapon is actually the longest continuously playing player in the world. From the first season of LJL, because at times like Faker was subbed out or stuff like that. Okay. And some of the other players may not have been on rosters, but he's like way up there because the LJL started, I think, in 2014, and he's just been continuously on this team that entire time. And I was disappointed by Evie this tournament. He really looked disconnected from the rest of his team. It was not what I was expecting, having seen him at previous international events. But Udapon was great. I think the Korean players on their team were also pretty good. And it was really fun to see a competitive series, at least in game 1 and kind of game 2, between RNG and DFM. Not really great for people who think RNG is going to win Worlds because they showed some distinct weaknesses, I think, in the series. It wasn't the cleanest of play that we've ever seen from them, but yep, it was fun. There were some highlights to these plans, right? There were some highlights. Fnatic doing very well. We haven't talked about Fnatic yet. They were a team that obviously massively overperformed, especially considering they brought that Rux guy in who looked quite good, actually, like legitimately quite good, before Hylissang could get there, and a team that really didn't have a lot of opportunities to scrim.
And then they did that stupid thing where they played that guy and he looked all right. Like, well, even looking at it good at times, I agree. And then when they put Hylissang back in, he just immediately like chain into the bunch, like immediately, like, what are you doing, bro? We just got you back in the team. I know it's mental, isn't it?
It was pretty funny. It was
that guy is just incorrigible. That's the thing about Hylissang. He's just incorrigible.
They lost to Loud as well. Loud was probably kind of underrated. What I loved about Loud throughout this event was that Loud didn't try and be fancy, right? They were going to play heavy engage, MF Amumu, front to back wombo combo ultimate team compositions. And these are the easiest compositions to play, guys, in League of Legends. But they knew their place. They should have beat EG. Number one, they draft gapped EG big time, and then they had a massive lead before they just teleport inted their way into a loss. I was shocked they lost that game. And then on the Fnatic side, they actually managed to beat them. And they showed enough kind of variations on a theme in their composition. Like they can play enough champions to kind of make that same fundamental compositional principle work, that they were able to kind of evade a lot of draft bans and picks from the enemy team in order to continue getting a very similar composition. So it was good, honestly. I thought Loud was surprisingly good. They were playing in a way where they weren't getting too fancy, right? They were doing something that was achievable for them, and you had to beat them at it. You had to find the timings in between their ult cooldowns, and you had to be good with other compositions and recognize their timers, their win conditions in order to defeat them. And it's simple, yes, but you might as well do one thing that's easy and you're good at and see if you can pull off some wins against teams that may be overestimating their abilities on certain more difficult to play compositions.
Obviously, there was that stupid piece of trivia that it was like, wait a minute, whose music is that? Tinones? Fucking Tinones? The guy from the fucking the Kaboom guy from season 4 Worlds, yeah. He's in their team. Yeah.
Tinones, the Slayer of Froggen, has returned to kill EU's hopes and dreams. He has defeated Fnatic.
You know, the thing that's really weird about it, I've never understood this actually. The problem is that, again, I'd actually love to know if anyone has a really good theory, not just a shit theory, right? I actually think the most underperforming region ever internationally in League of Legends is Brazil. Because if you don't know, first of all, they've always had like import players. Like they had loads of Koreans over the years. They even had bloody Crown at one point in time. We actually used to play in fucking Brazil. And what's mad is, no matter how dominant someone is in CB LOL, you can win the split, you could commit. Somehow they always just flop at Worlds. Like, there's the odd time, obviously, they had the BO1s. Obviously, they had one where Pain beat CLG and where Kaboom beat Alive. But aside from that, like, they was never really that relevant. It's kind of weird because if people don't know, in games like CSGO and Valorant, they are incredibly relevant at times. In fact, sometimes more so. If anything, they overperform in those games. So I just wonder why in League it's never really come together properly, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be that they're stuck there. I mean, the thing about Brazilian players in CSGO is that they were able to go to a different region with better practice in order to become the best, right? Yeah. Which is why, again, if Riot makes the decision to make Brazilians make the minor regions residents of the major regions, then we could see an all Brazilian team in LCS. And that might be a very different story if they could make a Brazilian team, a super team in the LCS. Might be fun.
Apparently, they have 11 million people play in Brazil, League of Legends. What?
Really? Wow.
I mean, that's just when I did a Google search. That's mental. What? 11 million?
Yeah, the server's not small in Brazil. I mean, their numbers for viewership are comparable to the LCS for CB LOL.
I saw they were getting mad viewership on those ES charts games. Like, yeah, they were getting more than some of the, like, they almost had as many for a Loud game as for the fucking Mad Lions EG, which everyone was claiming we all want, you know?
Yeah, maybe it's infrastructural in terms of coaching staff or support staff. Like, I don't really know. But there's clearly talent there. I will say, like, they are competitive in these play-ins, and it makes you wonder if these teams had practice in an LCS or LEC environment, how good they could be. And I think it would be good for LCS viewership, just like it was good for play-ins viewership with Loud, to have a Brazilian team, an all-Brazilian team within the LCS. That would be fun. I would really enjoy that.
It's just a cheat code to get the LCS viewership up, isn't it?
Yep. Exactly. I think people would be pretty hyped about that. You have more kind of regional rivalries. You get all of the Brazilian fans, especially if it's MIBR. Again, Immortals owns MIBR. The Immortals brand is completely fucking useless. So why not go ahead and give it a change to that other brand you own, MIBR, which is very popular. And also, you know, they own MIBR TV as well, which is the broadcaster, which has all the casting in Portuguese for various Counter-Strike and other events. So there you go. That could be an option. Should we talk about the groups now that we know what all the groups are? I mean, they were predetermined as long as RNG got in. There was potentially a small amount of chaos if RNG did not make it, because basically it would have been DFM and Fnatic, I think, that were not sorted into those groups yet, because EG had to be in Group B.
Still don't get that part, because like we say, it is possible now to have groups that aren't properly set that way, right?
Well, here's the issue. So DRX, as soon as they qualified, had to be in Group C because it's the only one without a Korean team, right? And then Group D, Royal had to be there if they qualified because there's no Chinese team in there. Otherwise, each of the other ones has those slots. Then EG has to be in Group B because Cloud9 is in Group A, and Fnatic has to be in Group A because there's no other European teams, right? Because G2 is in Group B. So that's why it works that way. But had Royal, for some reason, not qualified, DRX still had to be in Group C because there's no Korean team. And that means because there's no NA team, that's the group without the NA team, because 100 Thieves and Cloud9 were in the other two. EG has to be in Group B, and then it would have been a 50-50 whether Fnatic was in Group A or D, and DFM was in Group A or D. So that's how it works. I know nobody followed that, but basically the groups had to be this way. They had to be this way. As long as RNG was there, the groups were locked. So we do get Group A now with Cloud9, EDG, Fnatic, and T1.
Seems like a decent amount of parity there.
Yeah, I think the question is how good EDG is going to be in this meta. If it's going to continue to shift in the way that we've seen so far towards more farming junglers and potentially carry tops. Flandre was a point of weakness for EDG throughout LPL playoffs. He was like inting some games and looking really bad. Also, they were succeeding in a meta where, you know, Viper could absolutely pop off and carry on these mega carries like Zeri, right? Zeri's not in the meta anymore. She got nerfed too many times. And so can Viper carry this team hard enough? Maybe. He's probably the best AD carry at this tournament. That's on the table. Let's put it that way. But I don't think EDG they still have an outside shot at the World Championship. And the other side of that coin is that T1 should be a lot better in this meta. First off, Caitlyn is incredible for Gumayusi. You know, if Gumayusi can play Draven, Caitlyn, Kalista, he's going to be super happy. Korea was drawing Nautilus bans even in the finals versus Gen.G, so that's another consideration that you have to take. Thresh was buffed, and even though we haven't seen that much Thresh, I think only Vulcan has played it so far. That is a long-standing Korea champion that, if it's viable at all, will be really important for him, because again, it also allows him to get Gumayusi out of bad situations. Then you have Zeus being able to play more carry top laners. I assume we're going to see his Jace at some point in time. The only person I think it didn't do great things for necessarily was Owner. Lee Sin is viable. Lee Sin got buffed, but maybe Owner is not going to be the best at some of these farming jungle metas. but I still think it's better for T1 than the last meta was.
I will say, by the way, when LS did his like tier list for Worlds, I don't know if people saw this because people who just paused the graphic saw that like he had like the normal tiers, but then he had like a tier that was way below that had Lee Sin in, and I was like, oh LS, never change, never change. I love it. I just love it. I like when people are true to themselves. You know,
I mean, he doesn't like it because it's a sitter champ, and the concept is that it's a playmaking champ, and oftentimes it requires positional errors from teams in order to make the plays onto the carries. And so the logic goes, you shouldn't position like that against a Lee Sin. There go, it's user error and not the amazing play of the player. I do think that some Lee Sin players are so amazing that it's very difficult to stop them from doing what they're doing. And Owner, Canyon, these guys are some of those players.
The rough one for me is obviously Group B. Because if you're G2, it's like, the fuck is this? Like, what? We came second. Like, what's our reward? Like, how does Fnatic get, in theory, a better chance than us to maybe get out? Like, what the hell?
Well, my hot take is that we always have one of those Chinese teams that bombs out of groups. And my hot take is JDG might bomb out of this group. And the reason being is that this is a meta that should be much better for DAMWON and G2. Well, maybe not G2. We'll see.
We'll see if Broken Blade holds up.
Yeah, we'll see if Broken Blade holds up. We'll see if Jankos holds up. Like, I always get a little nervous when we get farming jungle meadows with Jankos, but it does ease up the pressure of their bot lane, and their bot lane can do G2 bot lane things like playing Seraphine or Senna or some of these picks that are more supportive and weak side in nature that can carry them through. So good for Broken Blade, good for their bot lane, probably not great for Jankos. But the thing about G2 is it's best of ones, and they're always one badass Caps performance away from taking a win over some of the best teams in the world. And for DAMWON Kia, this is just a massive upgrade, right? This is absolutely huge. You don't have to worry about so much your disconnected bot lane from carrying the game. Canyon is in his element. Good God, Canyon can come back and play as Karthus. He can play Nidalee potentially. He can play the Belveth, the Graves. I mean, Canyon's just going to have a field day in this meta. And hopefully Nogari has kind of gotten his shit together and they can play through some of these carry top laners as well. So I think the danger here for JDG is not that they're not one of the best teams in the world. They certainly are. The danger is that this format is best of ones, and G2 and DAMWON are very unpredictable teams with wacky ass strategies that you are going to have to deal with in best of ones. And you're going to have to deal with both of these teams in your group doing it to you. And a couple of losses against them is going to put you in a very, very rough position. Very rough position. So there's a chance that this team, if JDG was just in best of fives, they may be the world champion, but because they're in this format against these two teams in this group, they may just fall on their face.
The only thing I can say for Evil Genius is this: if you win any games, they're all going to be statement games. So it's a great chance to prove yourself. If you're actually good, Sleeper good, this is the best group to do it in. That's also because there's almost no universe in which you should be able to get out. Unfortunately for you.
Yep. I mean,
this is even one where it's literally possible you could go 0-6 and not even be like a laughing stock like TSM was. You could just go 0-6 and actually straight up lose to better teams. Could even play well and go 0-6. It's actually the group of death for them, unfortunately. Only for them, obviously, which is not how the group of death works, just for them specifically.
Yeah, either you're going to take a game off of two of the most famous teams in the world and best teams in DAMWON and JDG, or you're going to finally take your first game that you couldn't get at MSI versus G2, right?
Yes.
So I think JoJo's looked really good. It's a new team that's going to have slightly more time to get synergy. Obviously, this is very accelerated in terms of schedule with you only have 2 days off before you start playing your groups. The question is, do they even play? I think every team plays on the first day.
Looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, not every team, but they do. They play JDG on day one. Okay, that might be a little rough. Some really fucking sick matchups on day one, though. It's C9 versus Fnatic, G2 versus DAMWON. Flying Oyster for 103 is probably the worst game, which is, saying something.
Gives them a chance to start with a win, though.
JD, yeah, it does give 100 or Flying Oyster a first chance to start with the win. That'll be good for them.
That would be interesting.
JDG versus EG, T1 versus EDG. That's going to be hype. And Gen.G versus RNG, also going to be mega hype. Those are all great
By the way, here's what's great about the Gen.G RNG game. If RNG just comes right out and wins a BO1 against Gen.G, right back on the table. All the hype's back there instantly. One game, turn it all around for you.
Yep.
And Korea will just be mauled in. They'll be fucking the raging behind the scenes, going back to the drawing board. It might actually just bring out the final form.
Yeah, and I don't know how good Flying Oyster is as a team because I have watched exactly 0 of their games, but there's a chance they kind of embarrass 100 Thieves here, right? The PCS teams, LMS teams have always actually pretty much shown up at Worlds. And this is a team with a bunch of players that I am really unfamiliar with, but here's their opportunity to prove themselves. That's probably going to be the weakest group overall. Group D, you would think that Gen.G and RNG should be smooth sailing.
Easy.
Yeah.
Group C is the most interesting one.
Yeah.
That one is a wild group because think about this. Like a lot of people, like, let's be real, Monty. Most people didn't have DRX making Worlds. So you can't act like just because they're Korean, they're going to stomp the group.
No, I mean, we haven't talked about them because they're kind of bad.
Yeah, of course. So as a result, but here's the other question I have, though. In light of what you said about the farming junglers, does that nerf Malrang and therefore nerf Rogue?
Possibly.
That's a question, right?
And also carry tops. Is that really going to be in Rogue's wheelhouse with Is Odoamne? That's not how they were winning the title, right? They were playing really hard through their bot lane most of the time with super early game junglers, with Malrang's crazy Jarvan and his weird ass pathing and early ganking and sacrifices to get his lanes ahead. Well, that's not going to be as good any longer. And I trust Malrang. Malrang can always find a way to be weird and to make weird things work for him. So we'll see what innovations they have. We know they've been scrimming significantly before they left Europe.
It's only been one game of Jarvan played in the tournament so far, so
that
would be a bit of a reach to pick. That may not
stop Balrog. We'll see. His Hecarim, though, that might be a good champ if he can actually get his hands on it. DRX, people will look at DRX 5-0 and play-ins, but I kind of throw out their game versus RNG because, first off, RNG picked Neela, which was a super weird pick because that wasn't a champion that was prioritized during the LPL playoffs, but it was played pretty frequently towards the end of the LCK season and playoffs. It was much more popular there. So DRX would have had much more experience playing against that champion and playing with it than I assume that RNG would have had. Also, remember, there were 2 hours of delays that day.
Yes.
And RNG versus DRX was played after midnight in Mexico City with 2 teams that were probably extremely jet lagged.
Oh, it's wild. Yeah.
And it was their first game on this patch. Look, I'm not going to read into that one too heavily. Royal lost, but they did something weird. The time was weird. There was probably jet lag involved. It was the first game on the patch. Like, I'm not buying that yet. I think part of what's good for DRX is that the patch is playing out in a way where we don't see a lot of mid lane bans, which means that Zeka can really power up on champions like Akali and Azir, because Sylas is, has tended to be a little bit more high priority. Kingen can go back to the Ornn if he wants to. That's not a champion that's being banned anymore. And he was very famous for his crazy good Ornn engages and sick flash Ornn ults this season in LCK. And it was banned against DRX for a very, very long time. So it's a fringe meta pick that can be used by them pretty reliably. I was not impressed with some of Kingan's carry champions, but I think that goes without saying. And then the other side of it is Deft is still fucking phenomenal, right? Deft is still super good.
It's just old reliable, mate. It might not be the best anymore, but tell you what, he keeps ticking over, doesn't he?
Yeah, and Barrel's there to provide the shot calling. The question is really their jungle situation because they spent a lot of games playing Maokai in the jungle, which Pyosik and Juhan were kind of alternating. And then Pyosik had that fucking terrible game versus Mad Lions, where it wasn't just that he got behind due to the set strat and the invade that Mad Lions put upon him and made it his life difficult. It's that he was literally just straight up missing every Sejuani ult and being completely fucking useless in the team fights, even when, I mean, look, you can be underfarmed on Sejuani. Just hit your ult, right? Just hit your fucking ult. So I think they got to play Juhan moving forward. He's been much more solid, but I haven't seen a lot of diversity from DRX is my point. Like they were really reliant on the Maokai pick in particular. So you want to see something else from DRX if they're actually going to have a shot at making any kind of run here, because they seem pretty one-dimensional in my eyes at the moment.
Also, as much as people are going to look and see like top esports, you've been going on about that night guy for so long, Thorin, surely they will just 6-0. Like, listen, I don't trust any LPL teams until we get the best of fives, guys. I have learned, I never trust these guys in fucking group stage, man. They'll just lose a game randomly. They might just lose a game to fucking Rogue or something stupid. Could easily see it happening. Also,
Top showed in their 2 series against JDG that no lead that they have is unthrowable.
Yes.
That's the scary thing about Top is that they can get big leads. Will they throw them? Who knows? Who knows? Also, Wayward, as good as he was in the regular season, he looked nervous and was kind of a lot worse, I would say, during playoffs. And then there's also the Jackie Love coin flip naturally, right? Some games he's just going to giga carry you. Some games he's just going to completely run it down and lose you the game. So there's a lot of variance with Top, which I agree with you. Like the variance kind of evens out over a best of 5, but in best of ones, it can be sad.
And then also think about this. So you've got all these teams that relative to their power level, so obviously Top's up here, but then they can be shaky. And then Rogue's like maybe here with like DRX, but can both be shaky in their own ways. And what team do you insert as the 4th team to just create mayhem? The VCS, please. The VCS to the front desk. Clean up on aisle 4. I hope they come with the true spirit of the VCS, which is the finest Vietnamese cheese. That's just absolutely just give these guys nightmares. I don't know if that was that a thing actually, because in the UK in comics, if you ate cheese, it would always give you like nightmares or something. That would be like that's like a trope in old comics. Yeah.
No, I haven't heard that one, but I think the VCS playstyle is probably going to catch people off guard. Like they're like China, how China used to be. They just love fucking fighting. Like they just love it. They play really fast-paced games. They're not afraid of these kind of engages. And if you're not willing to kind of counter them at the pace that they're attacking you, then you may lose some games.
And if you are DRX, for example, it's a lose-lose scenario. If you win, who gives a fuck? It's GAM Esports. If you lose, you lost to GAM Esports. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those ones where I always feel sorry for Koreans. Like, it's just harsh.
I think the plus side to DRX is that they may not have the strongest group of players. And by that, I mean, they're struggling, obviously, with the jungle position. Deft is super good, but they don't really have any other world-class players. You guys will look at Zeka Zakali or Aziri and be like, wow, that guy's really good. Yeah, his champion pool that he can do that on are very small. And he'll probably get good champions for him again, because the rest of the pool is we're just not seeing a lot of mid-bans right now, especially on the champions that he's good at. And it just opens up Deft, I think, way too much if you start doing that. Like you just don't want to give Deft Callista. Like you do not want to give DRX Callista, because if you guys were watching LCK at all, DRX was doing very well at the start of the summer when they were getting Callista and Ornn every game. They're just smashing people. They are 2-0 over DAMWON in best of 3s. That was a very good matchup for them. And their strength is not in their individual players. It's in the fact that they actually have pretty good macro and shot calling. And if you make mistakes, they are really good at capitalizing on those mistakes. You saw that in the Mad Lions game, right? That has happened pretty consistently. But if you overpower them on an individual level, that is how you beat them. That is how you beat this team. I mean, Barrel's still a good shot caller. Like that hasn't changed. So.
Some would say there are other teams, you can make up your own mind, that might miss that quality at this point in time because they thought they had it in it. I've given it too obvious. Okay, yeah, you get it. It's all good.
Yeah, and what other groups do we have? Group D, I think Gen.G is still my favorite for the World Championship. We'll get photos.
I really hope they just
in those Tiger jerseys forever.
That's the dream. The dream is they just look super good coming out. First place team, no shenanigans, get like a proper matchup in the quarterfinals, then we're all good. We're all good at that point.
I think they're a lot better than Royal. But best of ones, who knows what's going to happen. That's an exciting matchup. Ruler should still be totally fine in this meta. He doesn't play Draven, but he plays pretty much everything else. And I don't think Gala plays Draven, not that I've seen. So everything else, Gen.G should be good. Their macro, their early game shot calling, their comeback potential. My God, Chovy's champion pool is going to be fucking incredible in this meta, you would have to believe.
I want to see some cheeky pick in the group stage as well. Some just pure banter, just to send the message.
Yeah, I mean, Chovy, it is actually gross how good this meta is for Chovy. I think that's the thing that really pushes it over the top for me, is that you simply are not going to be able to like ban Azir or Silas every single game against Chovy. And if he gets those picks, he will just destroy you.
By the way, I don't want to tease anything too obvious, so I won't say anything more. But essentially, you know, on this show, we invented something called the Dade Award. There's going to be Dade Awards. There's very much going to be Dade Awards. You aren't even prepared for the level of Dade Award we're going to hit you with. So all I'm saying is start thinking now who could potentially be the Dade Award winner. And then let's see, because you know someone's going to shit the bed. Some player's going to shit the bed. Because now we've got even more Asian teams as well, so there's so many hyped players in there.
Yes. It's actually impossible for somebody not to shit the bed because these groups are so competitive this year. Like the groups all look really good and
it's way better than those last years. Like the worst thing about the old years wasn't that you would have like, oh, but this group's too stacked. It's that you'd have one group that just wasn't. You know, there's one group where it was just too easy for someone. And sometimes if you were the NA team, if you got that one, you had a chance, didn't you? So it's like now, here's another thing I'll say. Any Western team that gets out of groups every year from now on is just done a really good job. That you have actually done job done at that point. So there's no free groups.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the most hyped up players who are probably the most likely to be Dade Award recipients, right? I think probably the most likely players are Viper, Knight,
Definitely.
369, Chovy.
Oh, absolutely, Chovy, of course. We're basically putting him as like a GOAT candidate potentially. So yeah, it's got to be up there.
Tian is probably another one. He's the reigning MVP of LPL.
Yep.
I don't really think anybody on T1 is super hyped. Not like, because like 369 hyped up is like the best, you know, the best top.
What about Carrier then? If Carrier somehow shit the bed.
Yeah, maybe. He was really good in spring and he wasn't as good in summer. So I think most people on their like player tier list they had him towards the top, but not the very tip top. From what I saw. Who else?
Caps.
Kanavi, maybe. Caps would be potentially another good one.
Yeah, Kanavi's a good one. Yeah.
Because I think that pretty much everybody had Peanut, Kanavi, and Tian. Peanut's another one, because look, if Peanut can't perform in this meta, which is just about mind controlling your opponents as a jungler and forcing them to play around you while you farm, like this should be Peanut's meta. This should absolutely be Peanut's meta.
Berserker?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know how much.
He wasn't supposed to be like world class necessarily. He's sort of on the fringe, and I guess he has the excuse. Yeah,
I think most people said Missing was probably the best support here. So Missing would probably be another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are probably the top of the list. Even though I think Yagao and Hope performed very well in playoffs, I don't know how they're going to do in this meta, and nobody thinks they're going to do is like super OP in this meta. I think it was much more like the Tian Knight Viper 369 hype.
You know what we need to do? We're going to do this, by the way. We don't need to do it. We're going to do it. We also need to create a counterpoint award, which is going to be really rude. Like they'll have to figure out the name. It might have to be something like the Bowlad Award or something. And it's like the player that should be absolute garbage, but then somehow actually like wins the tournament or does better than you expect. We've got to do the obvious, the counter indication, you know, like, oh, listen, I would be rude to call it the wolf one, but I know that's too painful for people. Whatever. So we've got to figure out, we'll figure one out for that as well, because that'll be banter too.
Yeah, there aren't enough LPL fans watching the show to get mad about the Baolan Award.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
What we need is some Twitch chat emotes with like the trophy with Dade's head on it.
Yes.
That's what we need.
Yes. We'll also get stuff like that made when you find out what the new company's called tomorrow.
Tomorrow, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah, who would be the short list of candidates, like worst players to win Worlds? Baolan, Ning, Looper.
Let me think. I mean, obviously someone on TPA, but who gives a fuck at this point in time? Someone on TPA probably, right? Stanley, maybe.
Crown. Crown's another one.
Crown when he was on Miles High. People always forget that because they always go, but he was yeah, season 6, he was really good. We mean in season 7, obviously.
Yeah.
Who else?
The Crown is a good name. You really have to.
I mean, look, it'll sound rude, but I do think Kim Goon wasn't like a great player or anything. He's a Korean, remember? He's won fucking Worlds. That's pretty ridiculous, isn't it? I know.
There are a lot of dumpster players who won Worlds, actually. That's kind of impressive.
More than you think. Yes, more than you think. That's enough.
That's enough.
Also, the other reason I forgot, here's the other storyline, just to thread back I'll just reach back to myself in 2014. Give
yourself the old Thorin reach around.
Because here's the thing. That's how legit I am. I give myself a reach around, right? Mr. Fantastic or something. Here's what people haven't thought of. Imagine if Score wins Worlds as a coach. Still somehow,
first year.
He'd still be lifting that trophy. I guarantee he cries. Still be lifting that trophy up. Oh, it's too good.
It took him a lot less time to win LCK as a coach than it did as a player.
And also, since he's coaching Peanut, is that like they've formed some sort of jungle archon that will overcome the choke and then make them ascend?
The brain and the hands have formed into one, but now Peanut doesn't have hands. So it's
basically, here's the analogy. Yeah, basically, Score is like Krang out of the team. They're all the 90s references. He's like that brain that was inside that like big body or whatever. That's Peanut's just a big body moving around. Yeah, there you go.
It's worked wonders for Peanut. I mean, big credit to the coaching staff. They really, I think, first off, they made Chovy and Doran both significantly better players. And Peanut is just absolutely running that team right now from a shot calling perspective. And he's doing a really good job.
I can tell, by the way, Chovy is actually one of the rare players. This is just a theory of mine, but this is what I think from the outside. He is one of the rare Korean players that it's not that I think he's uncoachable, but I think they did the silly thing where sometimes when someone is insanely good, every now and then some Korean coaches will give you a pass for doing loads of weird things in the game, and they'll just be like, he's just so good, especially if you're like, he's obviously got the reputation, mad hard worker, he's always amazing in solo queue, he always gets his CS in the game. Like, I actually got the vibe, dude. That's why I would agree that I'd give them mad props for the transformation he's had this year. I get the sense that like people did just think in the other teams, like, well, it's not Chovy's fault, is it? He was like never the worst player in any of those teams that failed. So it's very dangerous when you're as talented as he is, but you have those obvious idiosyncrasies that like absolutely can make you just not win the game, look silly, pick stupid fucking picks in big games where you should just carry. So now the reason why he's so sick now, it actually does remind me of players like Simple in CSGO. It's like, mate, when you're as good as these guys are, you have the unlimited work ethic. You just take those tiny little idiosyncrasies out of your game. You cannot be stopped. You are just going to shit on everyone.
I think that's what's so dangerous about this version of Gen.G is because they play a macro style that I've discussed many times on this show about maximizing the amount of gold and minions and everything, resources that you get on the map. And then they apply a dominance of resources to fucking fabulous players like Chovy and Ruler. Like, this is, in another team, this could be a crutch to get worse players into a position to win the game. On Gen.G, it is overwhelming force, right? It's putting a nuclear bomb in the hands of Superman. Like, just
the best way to play League of Legends right now.
Overkill. It's disgusting overkill.
Yes.
And that's why they're going to be really hard to beat, guys. That is why they're going to be extremely hard to beat, because they play a tighter macro game. They have very deep champion pools. They can play aggressive early. They can play from behind. And they do it with some of the very best players in the world. And I think they arguably have the strongest 1-2 punch and carries of Chovy and Ruler of anybody in this tournament.
I think they do. Yes. Because the difference is even the other people who like for example, skill-wise, Knight and Jackulov can do it, but who the hell knows if they will? These guys consistently do it every game.
Yeah. I mean, they had a much more, despite losing the one series, they had a more impressive win-loss record than the undefeated T1 team did. And they looked a lot less shaky than T1 doing it. The only times that we saw Gen.G look kind of shaky was their first series that they lost against T1. And then their games against DRX were shaky. And the way you can beat Gen.G is by being very weird, because their weakness is that sometimes they cannot read weird team comps that well. And they played some really brutal, like, brawl games against DAMWON where it was like Karthus jungle and weird shit.
Well, I'll tell you who's fucked then. 100 Thieves. Where's their fucking champion pools? I know exactly. Like, that's not good. It's going to be a play
standard against Gen.G. That's not going to
Exactly.
do you any favors for the most part. You have to be trickier than that. So I am anticipating a Gen.G victory. You're still playing them against the field. I put $3,000. By the way, here's a great time for an interlude, guys, on Esports Bet. You can get outright odds before group starts. So I just went ahead and put 3,000 USDT, which the winnings will come back to you guys. I put 3,000 USDT on Gen.G at 3.571 odds. So it's an excellent time to go do that if you think they're going to be outright winners on these groups. We'll put out an episode of Competitive Edge for you guys to look out for as well in the next day or two. Also,
here's the thing. This is when I can now mention, because it would be appropriate. There is an alternate first-time deposit bonus. Instead of just getting the 50% up to 200 USDT, you can do the up to 100 USDT bet forgiveness. And the reason I'm bringing that up now, what you do is you make the 100 USDT bet. If you lose, you message the mod mail and say Insight and Esports or Thorin or Monte, etc. sent you for the $100 bet forgiveness, because normally they only offer a $30 one, but if you say our name, you get the $100. The reason why I would suggest it now, if you were going to use it, is because if you look, because of the way the betting goes, all matches that are like big Asian team against Western team, which it's not like it's impossible to be or one, they have mad odds. We're talking like some of them are like 4 and 5 to 1. So logically, if you lose, you get the 100 back anyway. But if you win, you will get 4 or 5 times if you're doing something like, I'm going to guess like, 100 Thieves against Gen.G or something mental. I mean, I wouldn't do that one. I would do like Rogue against Top or DRX or something. Yeah, but basically this would be the perfect time to do it. Because here's the thing, by the way, don't do it for Gen.G 100 Thieves, because as we just said, that's probably the only one that is functionally impossible. Like, the joke is, if before that game the coach score comes over to Chovy and he goes, look, the one thing I want you to remember in this game is closer, then Chovy's going to go, yes, you're right, actually, and put on 9 Inch Nails closer and just be like, I'm going to fuck you like an animal. Whatever. That's another 90s reference. Is there anything I know beyond 1999? Who knows? Who knows? No one knows at this point in time.
I appreciate your alternative and alternative and grunge references. Don't worry.
Okay, there we
go. Also, guys, there's actually a $200 loss forgiveness bonus if you're on the stream too with us. So the first 100 people will get a $200 loss forgiveness bonus, which is also very relevant, because as an example, during the RNG Detonation Focus Me series, Detonation Focus Me was winning the game and they had 7.5 odds in live. So I put $200 on there and got like $1,400 back. So look for the live odds when the game starts too. Sometimes you'll get in a situation where like a team comp is even or slightly ahead with a big scaling composition and looks like they're controlling the game. And then you can just get crazy odds. And if you lose, you don't get that. But if you win, hey, sometimes you can pull off some of these upsets. So very good opportunities to do things like that. As for the rest of Worlds, I don't think that my opinion about Gen.G, like I said, has really shifted that much, that they are probably still going to be the best team, even though we haven't seen them in this meta. I think the only real threat in plans was that RNG was going to look god tier, but they really didn't. So for the rest of the teams, I think I'm still going with Gen.G. I haven't done my pick'ems yet. It's hard because there's always going to be that one fucking Chinese team that runs it down in groups. I might just try and go for like the most outrageous pick'ems possible and see if I can call some upsets. Like maybe Flying Oyster is like secretly really good and they're going to get out in second place in that group. RNG's form
you'll be one of the only people
that's
with
possible.
the pick'em. if you do get it. So there's that angle. I still think the greatest one of all time was that one where it was the time when ANX got out of the group in second place. And then when they got one human being in the whole world said that he did it. And when they contacted him, he said, I did it when I was drunk.
Yep.
That
was hilarious.
I know, that's just genius. I know, what the fuck.
I was so rooting for the DFM upset over RNG yesterday, because that would have been hands down the biggest upset in League of Legends history if this fucking Japanese team comes in and kills the MSI champion. Would have been epic.
Sure.
Would have been epic, but we didn't get it. Yeah. The possibilities for some of these teams getting out, like there is a world where GAM Esports gets out as well, because I have like zero confidence in DRX as a team. But it's rare that the Korean teams don't get out. In best of ones, the Koreans tend to be very consistent. They tend to be very consistent.
Not least because one thing I like about the Koreans is they actually do adapt when they lose. The Chinese teams just go double down. And then they just get bomb out completely, don't they? I know.
That's why they all have such wildly unique styles, though. There's an upside to that.
Yes.
That means when they double down, they're just going to continue to practice that thing that they really want to do with the players that know exactly how to do that one thing. And if you're good enough at it, that's when you can sometimes just wear the crown of the meta. You get into the right space, and then you just win worlds. I mean, we had there were 3 out of 4 of the semifinalists last year were Korean teams, and the Chinese team still won.
My dream is, though, to have Top and Gen.G play in the final. Just have Knight versus Trophy for the World Championship, because it's so rare in League you ever get like the true like god tier players go head to head in the biggest match, like the Super Bowl of the fucking sport. It so rarely ever happens. I just want to see it. I think it'd be amazing.
Yeah, that would be very fun. Do we have any other topics that we want to discuss before we go to viewer questions?
We're good for now.
I mean, I know it's only been 2 hours, guys, but play-ins, frankly, isn't that exciting. And sight unseen, it's hard to judge these teams. Plus, by the way, you're not going to have to wait very long until the next episode of Summoning Insight, because we're going to do one halfway through the group stage. So that'll be on the 11th next week. We'll do another live episode. So we'll do one after the first round robin, after the second round robin, after quarters, semis, and finals. And, I forgot about this. Also, between the first and second round robins, we're going to have a new show on this channel. So now is a perfect time to subscribe to the YouTube or podcast channels if you haven't already. Also, as an aside, if you watch it on YouTube, subscribing to the podcast channels also really helps us. It really helps us get more numbers on those platforms as well. And as we move into this bold and brave new world of turning this into a legitimate fucking company, that will become important to us. Usually we just didn't give a fuck about how many people viewed this show or marketing it effectively, putting it on podcast platforms. Didn't happen for many years. Properly. Advertising. Properly.
Mate, if I could go back in time, we used to be on the front page of Twitch with 10K unique live streamers. We'd have a VOD that would have like 300K views, and we didn't even properly monetize it all. Like,
it was very hard to monetize it back then.
It's true. It wasn't as easy as it is now. That's true, actually. There was that element to it. By the way, can we just do a quick break before the questions?
Yep. We can do a quick break and we'll be back with viewer question, guys.
Right, we're back for the viewer questions, which you can ask if you have 25 GROGcoins, which you go to the Insight and Esports Discord. That will also change at some point in time. And but don't worry, it'll be there in the future in a different name. And then you go into the GROGcoin lounge, check the pinned tweet and buy the coins if you want to ask a question.
Yeah. Do not be alarmed, guys, when everything changes its name. Okay. All of our channels are going to change names. So just be aware that that is a thing that is happening. So when you see it, do not panic. It is still exactly the same thing. It's just with a name change.
And we got this really cool like tiger design that we're going for. Monte's son came up with, actually. Yeah.
Gen.G stole it though. I showed it to Arnold, and he was like, he just yoinked it for the Gen.G jersey. So we had to come up with something else, unfortunately.
And I was like, "Hey, Arnold!" Whatever, just another 90s reference. Keep going. Keep going.
Let's go. Now that he's finally got his championship, how far is Odoamne from becoming the GOAT Western top laner? And what steps remain until he can be a serious contender for you? I think it's hard for Odoamne because he's in the shadow of Wonder, right? So
and Soaz,
yeah.
I think people forget this. Suarez has a fucking unbelievable international record. Bearing in mind he's in the era when he couldn't win worlds. Like, this guy's been in semis a billion times. Like, come on, man. Like, yeah, the problem is the resume is what he still has to catch up on in it. So, by the way, this will be a great chance this world's now. Because here's the other thing I've got to say. When you weigh up people's resumes, like I said before, because the groups are way harder now, dude, where you go in the playoffs is way more impressive now than some of those past runs where you could just get a bit fluky. You know, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really hard for him to eclipse that, but he's certainly in the conversation at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's probably, I mean, I think he's in the top 3, most likely. Those are the 3 that would come to mind. So I think it's just great that he finally won his first title, and he certainly has such a valuable role to play on many different types of teams that he should continue to have a great career, I would think.
Yeah, there's the other thing. If anything, he's at his peak. He could win more titles. So, yeah, I mean, at this point in time, it's up to him how high he wants to go on that list.
Are there any other players who became a flash in the pan and flared out just as quickly, like Dade? Well, Pawn would be another one, right? Due to his health issues, he had a very brief, I would say, period of success in China. Name would probably be another one who kind of just like straight up died after his Worlds performance. Piglet, honestly. Piglet was very good for a very brief amount of time and then just like bummed around being semi-bad in NA for a long time. Noon would be another one. Probably the best player in his position for a period of time and then fell off super quickly. Those would be ones that I would pick. Why do nephews always big up old players they have never seen before? Bengi seems to get better and better with each year he has retired.
That's the joke, isn't it?
So
here's the thing. You've answered your own question. They didn't see all the games. They didn't see the game where Faker just like sort of covered him in the jungle and therefore like, wow, he beat this other jungle. Like, he didn't though, did he? Like, it's not like he 1v1 and destroyed everyone. So yeah, the real problem basically is that's the joke is, have you noticed there's a really unique phenomenon? It goes like this. If you're like enough that they saw the end of the career, then they think that guy is absolute trash and was never good. Like, for example, I'll guarantee if you said to someone, this was a real discussion in the 2000s, that like Drew Brees is comparable to Tom Brady, every moron now would be like, no, what are you talking about? Because they only saw at the end when he was all busted up and he was just throwing the ball to Alvin Kamara, didn't they? Like, but the point is, if you get like just far enough away that you're Joe Montana and they've never seen you and they've heard you and your resume looks good, then you're actually like above a bunch of players that maybe were even better than you at quarterback. So yeah, I think that's the problem is they didn't see the games and they're looking at like, it's one thing that's a really weird phenomenon, Monty, because here's the thing. What I always do is this, like in the esports games I've played and followed, I have actually gone back and studied the history, and obviously it's not like it's 50 years ago, it's like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But the weird thing to me is why can't people just say like, this is my like top 5 guys, but obviously I didn't watch before 2007. They have to always do the opposite, because I always get mad triggered in my native game of CS, because think how bad it is for me now, Monty. Counter-Strike has been played as a top competitive game from the end of 2000. So I have people who weren't even born and didn't watch any games telling me how good people in 2005 were and that my ranking is wrong. Like, I'm sorry, that does just drive me almost crazy if I read those comments. So there's some sort of like a desire to have an opinion on stuff you never watched.
Well, here's the other thing, guys. It's because nephews are trying to cosplay as uncles, okay, is what they're doing. So they didn't watch these games. They didn't watch Bengi's career at the time this was happening. Maybe they went back and watched the World Championship or title runs.
Watched the Nidalee game, apparently, is what everyone saw.
Yes, the one Nidalee game.
The least representative game of all time of his play, I know exactly.
That was the least representative game. The most representative game of Bengi was that game where he played like Metal Gear Solid on Nunu and just avoided everything, out like counter jungled and then warded for Faker. That was the actual Bengi, right? And there was nothing wrong with Bengi, guys. He was great at being Bengi and enabling Faker, but that was his job. His job was doing that. So the nephews, and the funny thing is, once the nephew cosplaying as an uncle encounters a real uncle, the real uncle's just like, what the fuck? This is just 3 kids in a trench coat standing on top of each other. And it's you just rip off the trench coat and it just all falls apart immediately, right? It's hilarious to see. So these Bengi people who are not even around at the time, who didn't watch his career, are so funny because I hate it because it actually strips. What it does is it taints history First off, it makes Faker's legacy worse, which fucking sucks, right? Fucking sucks for Faker. Because if he's the best jungler of all time, well, all of a sudden Faker probably isn't as good because he couldn't have carried so hard, right? So it tilts our perception of Faker's true greatness. And at the second time, it also robs Bengi of being cool in his own way and his actual legacy. So it's lame. It's lame.
I'll give you a psychological or anthropological reason as to why I also think it happens. Because the natural mechanism by which young men like learn the world is to test their boundaries, and that includes boundaries like what are you allowed to say. It's one of the reasons, if you notice, I am one of the few people who was so against the idea of utterly trashing people's whole careers if they make a silly tweet or they say a naughty word one time as if it's like the end of the world, because these people are going to test the boundaries. They are going to push back against authority figures, and what they're going to see is, do I get slapped down, or in this case, do I get away with it? And that's like an essential part of figuring out your bearings in that particular case. It seems like women do it differently. There may be about, I don't know, consensus of opinion or validation of what's acceptable. Like maybe like I say, what's the consensus? That's what you're trying to key into. Whereas if you look at young men, especially the ones who have passion and super into it, they're going to sort of bristle. They're going to, it's why famously you roughhouse with your son or whatever, don't you? Because they've got to get that energy out of them. They can't just sit down and go, just write down everything that you're thinking. And like that doesn't work for kids. They're almost like a dog, give them the chew toy and they go wild, don't they?
Yeah. As somebody with a toddler, I can identify with this. Based off of what we've seen in the play-in meta, any predictions for teams that might have gotten a buff or debuff? I think we covered that, actually. We covered kind of which teams would have gotten buffed or debuffed by this meta. With how bad some pro usernames can be, what would be your most important guidelines for picking a name?
I actually think this area is a bit like overrated. Like, I don't really think you can construct the coolest name ever. It's pretty hard, isn't it? Because some of the ones that are whack become cool, and some of the ones that are like, the problem is if you suck as a player, your name becomes a meme no matter who you are, don't you? Like the joke is Tactical is a good name. It's just a really bad name if you literally int. You know what I mean? Like I always just say that's the part that's whack, isn't it? And then some of them, by the way, some of the ones that really do crack me up is where it's unintentional. So, for example, Knight is a brilliant name. Apparently, he didn't know Knight with a K was a real word in English. He put the name Knight and put a K in front of it. That's like, oops. What?
Yeah. I don't know. Like,
what would your rules be? How would you, if you could go back now, how would you construct a username?
I would remove all numbers from names because that's just really annoying most of the time. And it would, back in the Leet Speak era or just Chinese players, like picking numbers for names is something that I really don't like. I think it should try and be evocative of your goals or an ideal that you have or your play style or something like that. And it has to be unique.
68. Oh, no, not 68.
Skullfucker would be a great name.
There you go. If you're allowed it, obviously.
Skullfucker would be amazing. I actually would love for us to have a pro player named Skullfucker.
Oh, you know what I would love to? Oh, I've just come up with what would be a really... Here's what you need to test, because whoever gets through this loophole has access to a world of memeing and marketing no one else does. I don't know if you know this principle, Monty, but you know, famously in American comics, the reason why there wasn't swearing for a long time is because there was that thing, the comics code, which you had to follow, and you weren't allowed to swear or mention sexuality. So, right. Well, the thing is, in the UK, we had a similar thing. Like in the UK, if you don't know, obscenity laws are like way different than America. There's not the same level of freedom of speech, right? So what they did in 2000 AD, the magazine where Judge Dredd comes from, where he's crushing people's fucking heads and doing mad like tyrannical, abusive cop stuff, is they just figured out their own sort of like Clockwork Orange style terminology that was obviously swearing because they invented it. It's not swearing. So famously, they would just say like frick, or I think it was frack was the one in 2000 AD instead of fuck. Whoever comes out with something like that, like skull fracker. And if you get away with it, mate, like I say, you will just be the king of memes at that point in time once people know what you mean. Because in theory, Riot can't stop every possible euphemism.
It's true. I mean, they don't even try. They didn't even try to stop balls, right?
That is pretty ridiculous. I know. That one was pretty wild, isn't it?
Which I liked. I think it's funny. Whatever. So if it's funny, like, I don't know. I like names that are kind of fringe words that aren't doubling up. Like also having the same name as the other player is pretty terrible a lot of the time.
I'll tell you a rule, and I'm going to apply it because Danny's an obvious example. If you actually pick like a normal first name that isn't your first name, that just always seems off. I don't really get what you're doing at that point. Like, why? Why? Like
exactly.
You know what I mean?
What I view gamer tags is you don't get a chance to name yourself in life. This is your one chance to name yourself. So why would, out of all the things you could want to be, why would it be Danny? Why would it be Reginald? why
Oh yeah,
would
it's true.
Why would it be
Yeah.
these? Why would it be these things? I don't know. I'm profoundly disappointed by those people's creativity. Let's go on to the next one. After RNG's loss to DRX, a trending meme in Chinese forums was that Xiaohu's aborted baby came back to haunt him in the form of Maokai saplings. Holy shit. What are some similarly edgy memes in esports? I am not going to revive the past, guys. You know, there was a time in the 2000s when a lot of things were said in esports. I don't think we should bring back that because it would only make people mad at people who do not say those things anymore, or it was very edgy at the time, may not have aged well. I don't want to cause those people problems, is what I'm saying. But if you go back to old VODs, you might be entertained. You might be entertained. Do you know of anything like that wouldn't get people in trouble now?
No, because that's the problem with the question. If you could answer it, it'd be a brilliant question. But obviously, you're just saying, say all the naughty things. Well, then we just get in trouble. Why would we get in trouble over some shit we didn't even do or say? How about that, eh? I mean, look, it's not that edgy, so I'll give you one that's not that edgy. Like, I used to, obviously, back in the day, because I had that analogy that I actually, interestingly enough, this is aged very poorly, but told to Froscorin back when we were friends. I had the analogy about Claylove being like Kate Upton, just a really brilliant pair of tits. And obviously, I used to just post a picture of Kate Upton every time Claylove carried. And then the joke is half the people are like, why are you posting this? It's like, it's not really, like, even if you don't know the reference, it's not rocket science. Just look at the tits and go on with your life. Like, I never really understood. So like, but why? We must figure out the code. Like, there's no code. See those fucking pair of poppies? Yeah. Lovely, aren't they? Right. Go on with your day. Sometimes, Monty, a cigar is just a cigar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to stick my cigar between those fucking puppies. Oh, sorry. I mean, just a cigar, whatever.
Just a regular cigar.
Exactly. Yeah.
For Monty, what smoker do you use and would you recommend it? I just have a Charbroil electric smoker right now because it's like $200. I didn't know how much I would use it. The answer is quite a bit, apparently. So I didn't want to buy something really expensive when I was still learning how to smoke, but I am thinking about maybe upgrading eventually because having a Traeger or one of the Weber pellet smokers would be super nice. That also
is it just for the flavor or the time it takes or what?
So the smoker that I have is an electric smoker, so you can't get smoke rings on your meat. I mean, the meat still tastes amazing.
You want like the wood one?
No, it has wood chips in it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like it looks like a mini fridge. And it has like an electric coil in it that heats the wood chips, so it still gets all the wood smoke, right?
Right, okay.
The difference is the pellet smokers are better at circulating the air, so it just makes it even like better quality. And also they're grills at the same time. Now I have a separate Weber grill, but you can also grill with the smoke, which is different. It allows you to do more things and do like rotisserie and stuff. Anyway.
Monty just copying my old brand, Grilled. Bringing that back. That's a fucking meme and a half right there. People won't know what I'm referring to, will they? I know.
So yeah, but honestly, the cheap Charbroil electric is really good. It's really good. So not a priority for me to upgrade considering I already have the smoker and I already have a grill. If I had an extra $1,500, maybe I would upgrade both. In the Four Horsemen, Monty talked about supporting the people in the scene directly. Can you expand on how to do that? Stay tuned. Once we get the new company and brand done, there will be a better way for you to do that. What we're trying to do is create a project where all of the talent have equity within the project, and so are co-owners, and so we'll get direct benefits from the growth of the company, the growth of our shows, the growth of our content, and other methods of support. Merchandise will be a great way to do that when we get around to that.
Yeah, that's the other thing I would say. We're not looking to just like have a handout, like give us money, like to support. No, like the premise I would have is it should always be an exchange of value. So the problem right now is just the way the mediums work. You get the value for free and we get the money from the sponsor. So like Monty says, how about this? Instead, one of the reasons I've never done merchandise, I've had a million people approach me and go, look, you just give me the design, or I'll make the design, or you put your name on it and I'll do all the I've always said to them, though, I'm not going to have my fan buy like the $30 t-shirt and it's all shitty material, gets wrecked in the wash. Like, what we'll do is we'll make something legit, and then the idea is you'll want to buy it if you actually like that thing. You won't be doing it just to help us. There'll be a selfish reason to do it.
Yeah, the new logo is cool as fuck too. So, and there's a real message behind this company that I think you guys will be on board with if you're our fans. Also, we will eventually get our shit together with like, emotes and stuff like that. So subscribing to the Twitch channel will be probably very useful for us. Also, just in general, as we start to get more sponsors, first off, a way you can really help us, and this is true, is to go to Esports Bet, make an account with our referral link, and go to their Discord and ask them for the 50,000 DJT. Maybe play around with the lost forgiveness bonus, guys. It really does help us like a lot if you do that. So that is very useful if you have time to do that. Plus, it's fun. You guys can just go play with DJT for the rest of Worlds and the major, rest of Blast World Finals at the end of this year, everything like that. It's a good time. And if we have other sponsors in the future, then, or when we have other sponsors in the future, if you are thinking about, buying some of these products, then buying them through us is very helpful. Now that Carlos is out of G2, how likely is it that Flakked stays in G2 for another year? I mean, obviously, look, guys, G2's entire rubric of winning and GMing is gone. Like, it doesn't matter what you think about Carlos. It doesn't matter what you think about what happened. The function of Carlos being gone is that the brand is in the fucking dirt because he was the brand. And also their competitive, the willingness to take risks competitively and have that eye for when a player has reached their ceiling and like when to cut players, when to move players, who to sign is fucking busted. So G2 is just an entirely different org right now from both a brand and a competitive standpoint. It will be ridiculously difficult for them to stay on top without Carlos, I think.
I also think a very underrated aspect about people like Carlos, Cloud9 Jack, and then Steve from Team Liquid is they are also really fucking good in the meeting when you have it with the top player, getting that player to want to join their org because they're the one asking. Like, that's one thing I think Carlos basically nailed these last few years. It's the reason why everyone accuses him of poaching all the time, because the joke is everyone poaches, but he's just even better at poaching. Like, the others just come with a big sack of money, or the others go, what about these players? And it's like he sells you on the idea, like, you're going to be a G2 player, you're going to be a Yi2 player, you're going to do that. He sells you on the whole vision, doesn't he? Funnily enough, by the way, that's what TSM used to be back in the day. You joined TSM also to get your streaming up and become famous. And it's like there was all these other extra reasons too. So I would also add this in. I go the opposite way on that, dude. I would actually say, if anything, it just means Flakked's probably a lock to stay because he's so popular as a player. He's got his own sort of brand. People love him. At the moment, it hasn't been an issue. If anything, I think without someone like Carlos, you just go with the traditional method of, if the team was good, it was in both the finals, almost won both the splits, you just stick with the same players. You don't make the bold moves you're talking about like he did. Like, remember, I'll say this forever. I don't think another person ever, maybe Jack in light of what happened with Summer, but I don't think, even then he had to fail badly in the game. I don't think any other org owner would ever cut Reckless. I think that is one of the most bold moves of all time.
Yep. Especially after you get him from your rival for the first time ever.
Yeah.
It's also the circumstances, right? It's not just that it was Reckless. It's that he was your rival on your rival team. He's the face of your rival. And then he becomes, your player. It's pretty amazing. And then you just get rid of him after he wins MVP that year. Bold. Has the "it was all a dream / illusion in the end" trope ever worked? When can it work? I guess in movies or literature. Can't think of a time it's ever worked. And I also don't think it can work. They kind of did it at the end of Inception, but they left it open-ended.
Well, the joke in Inception as to why it's actually genius is if it was a dream, they set up enough plausible deniability that it isn't a dream, and maybe you're just inferring it yourself. But I do think essentially the implication is it was actually a dream. That's how I took from that movie, at least. Yeah.
But they left it open-ended, so that's what was cool about it. Is that they set up this world where you could go so deep into layers of dreaming that you never would know where you are anymore.
Well, here's the problem. What did he say? It was all, it can be illusion as well, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the movie that I think does an amazing job with that. It's a movie that came out before or around the time of The Matrix, called The 13th Floor. And if people like the idea of simulations, this is one where they also have an interesting ending. So basically, I think that was
it's been a while since I've seen that one.
That's a good one. That's one that's a good deep pull. And then I would also just say, he didn't technically just say in movies, right?
It just said in anything.
Well, then the one time, inarguably, that it was all a dream was when Biggie read Word Up magazine. Just an amazing lyric from Notorious B.I.G. Go look it up. It's one of the most all-time classic rap lines. So that was a brilliant example of using it was all a dream.
There you go. Where is the best place for someone in the Midwest to hear who has the most of those sweet scrim bucks? In the Midwest, where is the best place? I don't know if that information about scrim bucks is really that public in League of Legends. I don't know where there's not like a Discord channel where people are going to be leaking stuff about what
you have to just know people in the scene, basically.
Yeah. I don't know.
And then, as we pointed out and joked on the show,
here
they don't even directly tell you half the time, because there's that whole code of euphemisms. Like, we're doing pretty well against T1, which means that you won one game when you thought you'd get 5-0'd in the scrim blocks, doesn't it? So half the time they're not even totally honest, and you only know that when you know like all the people involved, and you just compare notes. And you're like, this doesn't even add up. Yeah, exactly.
Because the team perspective is like, oh yeah, we kicked their ass, and the other team's like, yeah, they beat us like 3-2. We won 2 of the games. So it's hard to get the real data. Let's put it that way. Dota question. The creation of the DPC system, adapting the regular season format to the Dota scene, has caused similar problems to LoL with regards to player burnout. Do you know any context behind the adoption of the DPC? Well, I will say that the Dota scene is kind of set up for failure because the players have all the control in the Dota scene and actively reject coaches and infrastructure that might help them prevent burnout, because the only thing they've ever cared about, like, they will literally just only care about TI because their salaries are irrelevant to placing. Like, if you place top 8 in TI, you'll win way more than you would from your salary for an entire year.
It's like winning worlds, coming like top 8. Just 8th place.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get such a huge amount of money that they will just, a lot of them have just never had good coaching systems or team infrastructures surrounding them. So I guess it's not surprising that this would happen, but I don't really know about DPC or Dota. I pay very little attention to Dota because,
as far as I know, the main problem with the DPC is, like, this is why I always say we're the only ones who ever did this. What you do is you sit down and you decide, what am I selecting for? So the DPC, in theory, Monte, should try and select for the top X teams for real over a calendar year or season, to then have them play at the World Championship, which, by the way, would mean you had easily the best championship in all of esports. Bear in mind, you've got the best format as well. But the flaw that they have, as far as I can tell, because this is actually how it was created, is the purpose of creating it was to make it so that people didn't say Dota is just TI and then who cares. So what they did, as far as I can tell, the main people they catered to was the TOs. That seems to be the people that they were trying to divide up. You get a spare, because basically, whereas in the other Valve game, CSGO, Valve doesn't interrupt at all. So actually, ESL can have a functional monopoly and then sort of like let Blast have a little bit here and then let someone have the. But in the DPC, the idea was like, you get this tournament, he gets this tournament, he gets this tournament. And so, as far as I know, one of the flaws as well is it then means you have almost like sometimes too much parity between like the dodgier or the not as good TOs and companies, and then maybe their event shittier and they hold it in a place people don't want to go to. And then there's all the problems of, well, someone didn't attend an event. Oh, there's so much drama. And so the problem is, like I say, the question is, who are you trying to serve? Who's your customer? In this particular case, I think it's more like the TOs. It's a way to get them in on the scene as well. That's the reason why I think it's not so good. But I do think you could do it. Essentially, the DPC done properly is my dream for any esports game. It's the idea. I mean, dude, Magic the Gathering runs this way. It's the idea that, like, you get enough points from all the circuit things that the right players make it to the finals, whether they win or not, so that the best player or team can win. Whereas the problem is, RNG is the best example. RNG is the MSI champion, and they almost didn't make it Worlds. Like, who wants that? I mean, even if they're not good, you kind of do want them there just for the off chance that they reignite the magic.
Rank best to worst org in LCS. I mean, it just depends on what you think. Like, what metrics am I ranking by? Come back with that, because you guys probably have different opinions than I do. I don't give people points because they're spending a fuck ton of money and not making any money. You're like, oh yeah, Immortals sucks. Well, Immortals isn't wasting a shit ton of money. for no reason with no chance of making it back. Like, they're actually trying to run a savvy business in a way. Does their branding suck? Yes, but they're also just not hemorrhaging money. The problem is that the orgs and the orgs are not incentivized due to the system to increase performance unless they're going to Worlds, basically. And even then, you see a team like Liquid that can just burn out with the most expensive roster in LCS history. Probably that wasn't a good idea, but you know, Liquid does a good job of taking care of their players. They certainly invest in the scene. I don't think there's a good answer to that question. There's just different goals, basically. I don't think any of the orgs are mega trash or anything.
TSM's pretty bad, but
oh yeah, sure.
they're the only one I feel like is objectively bad. You know?
Someone you want to impress is coming over for dinner. What do you cook? Well,
there you go.
I would ask them what they like, and then cook something that I think would be interesting to them that they like. I would ask for any dietary restrictions. I try and make my cooking choices based on what I think the person would enjoy. How to read objectively better? How do you guys read? Like, is there a way to increase your comprehension?
All the questions I've been asked. I know he knows how to read.
Yeah. How to read.
Well, I'll give you something you can do. Two things I would give as tips would be like this. One, if you read and like a word doesn't make sense or a concept doesn't make sense, don't let it stress you. It's like learning a new language. You don't just the second you get one piece of grammar wrong, go, right, stop. I've got to go away and learn all. No, just keeping going will make your brain will actually, your subconscious will start sort of figuring out by process of elimination or how it's repeatedly used in a context. You'll actually start to just sort of like form it in the same way as a child does when they're just hearing all these words coming at them. So that's one thing. And then secondly, I mean, a classic thing, it's just nobody does it in the modern day, is take fucking notes in the margin. The margin is there. Get a pen, make notes. Think, well, this character,
it's interactive.
And then go back later. Yeah, basically, if you do a little bit of work like you would on a paper or something, it will. If a really good book will absolutely yield benefit. I know people don't do it because they're lazy, but it's a classic method.
Also, just they've done tons of studies on this, guys. If you write things down with your hand, not with your little thumbs on your phone, not with your little fingers on your keyboard, you will remember it better. I have always, as a caster, done all my prep in like journals on paper, because I find that if I'm making a spreadsheet, I do not remember the numbers, but if I am writing all the numbers down, I will remember them. It's in my opinion, a much better way, at least for me, to absorb that information. And the same goes for books and marginalia and everything you can do there. And also just interact with the text. Have your own ideas with the ideas on the paper. See how they interact. It's the best way to learn. Can you give some insight, if there is any, as to why Riot forces mixing the broadcast talent during game/segments? My impression is that when these people don't work together for the majority of the year, some of the LPL and LEC talent work together. That's true, like Dagda, right? But whenever they put part NA talent, part other talent, the discourse becomes forced and fake, as if the talent is going with all their safe lines and takes. Am I missing something, or does Riot have a guilty pleasure for making important and prestigious tournaments the worst? I mean, it's very easy, guys. They don't like caster duos, because if one caster duo becomes very popular, these people now can get together and block negotiate, and all of a sudden they have to deal with potentially losing two people instead of just one. They can't play these people off of each other. I am just going to say straight up that it is objectively worse to have constantly swapping duos as a caster. I worked with DOTA as my main casting partner for 7 years. That is why we have such good synergy, right? It takes time to build up that synergy. There's a reason why people liked the desk at Worlds when it was just me, Double Lift, and Crepo every game, because we could keep the narratives going. We could keep the banter going. And you can throw some other people in there occasionally just to freshen it up or have other expertise, sure. But it's like inside the NBA is good because it's those four guys, right? But it also makes it harder for Riot to have control in those scenarios. It makes
essentially
it
Riot will always cut off their nose to spite their face.
Yes.
If the one thing we have learned in esports is the best, most high-level synergy, fucking cooperation, balance comes from having people work together a lot and get to know each other sort of like it's the reason why all these talk shows just shit on everything they do. Like some of the Insight, me and Monte have done this for like fucking 8 years. I did Buy the Numbers with Richard for like 6 years. I've done shows, I've been doing things with Moses for like, what, 5, 6 years? Like, you can't beat those sorts of chemistry. Like, I find it even when I go and work with someone else really good, they could be better than Moses. They might be better than Richard. It doesn't matter though. It might take years before I can get anywhere close to that sort of like chemistry. Yeah.
So it's really tough. And I don't, the reason why Riot does it is very cynical. You can ask yourself these kind of questions all the time. Here's a question for you guys. If Riot believes that tri-casts are the best way to cast League of Legends, which I can only assume that they do think that because they do it for all of their most important finals and events. So therefore, they think that that is the best way to cast it. Why aren't all the casts tri-cast? Why are they intentionally giving you an inferior product for most of the year? Why are they not allowing 3 people to develop synergy over time so that they are at their best in the most important games? I can tell you right now, the Koreans always tri-cast. They tri-cast every game I was ever at OGN. Every single game. And they still do that as far as I know. So why is it that Riot thinks that the best way to cast is tri-casts, but they don't have consistent tri-casts, and also those people never get the chance to get that synergy? It's fucking weird, right? It's fucking weird. Logically, it makes no sense unless you think they're trying to save money, and also they're constantly swapping up their caster pairs and moving people in and out because it gives them the best leverage in negotiations.
I've always thought that Riot is just like big fish in a small pond syndrome, except it's a big fish in a big pond. It's just not as big as it could be, right? The problem is they always act like they don't know any other esport exists. Like the joke is they really do seem to think they invented esports. And the joke is they probably think they invented tri-casts. Like that's the vibe you get when they do it. So like what's annoying to me about them is they are just like the little kid who has one trick and they're like, look, I'm doing it again. It's like, oh, it's just boring now, mate. Like fucking level your shit up. We're on season 12.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's the same reason why I think it's probably similar to the question of if you have good casters, why don't they do more games? Right? There aren't that many LCS and LEC games. There just straight up aren't that many. I spent a year in Korea doing 10 best of 3s a week. The LPL casters do like 10 best of 3s a week these days. It's certainly possible to cast more than LCS and LEC casters do, and it's possible to cast well. So why don't they why it seems like they're overstaffed in my mind. Now I wouldn't recommend doing 10 best of 3s a week. That was a little hard. I'm going
to say, look, that's too much. But the problem, the obvious one, I didn't set this standard. But again, the precedent has been set. We're told the current schedule for Western people is causing people burnout and mental health problems. So there you go. Bearing in mind, in the modern day, and Optic proved it with the Carlos G2 thing. I actually thought Sideshow did a very good video on that exact topic, explaining it. There is no line. There is no rule. There is no coherent set of things. It's all optics. If the optics look bad enough, it doesn't matter what the stuff behind it is. If what's behind it is really evil, but the optics are fine, then that also doesn't matter. So as far as I can tell, they don't care about stuff like that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the reason why I was able to do that was because OGN didn't fucking ram my schedule full of stupid ass meetings, right? They didn't burn me out because it was like, you show up, you do a fucking good job on your own research, or we fire you. That was it. That was it. We didn't have a bunch of dumbass meetings about where I had to inform the producers about what the storylines were because I was trusted just to tell those storylines. Like, honestly, production in esports can be pretty maddening at times. It was pretty maddening in my experience with Overwatch League because I had so many, they were just like vampires for my time when I could have been making a better product. And if they knew enough to do their jobs, they would have just done their jobs. Considering LJL seems to be consistently outperforming the other minor regions, should they get 2 seeds into play-ins next year? It's an interesting argument. Probably not. I mean, they didn't get out of play-ins, guys. I guess your argument maybe is like, well, you know, Vietnam has 2 spots and they didn't get as far as LJL in the play-ins, but who knows? who knows what the consideration of that might be. PCS didn't even get into the playoff stage of play-ins, right? For their number 2 seed. I think it's interesting to see how Riot will consider that. I'm not sure I agree that they've quite been up to that standard, but perhaps. What's the most creative cheating in any esport? We probably don't know the answer to that question because they weren't caught. The most creative cheating is probably the most indetectable cheating. What do you think? Is there any most of the cheating is pretty lame, actually.
I mean, the funny thing is, yeah, like a lot of it now is actually known. Like that thing we were talking about on the watch party with like a vibrating thing. That was a thing from Counter-Strike years and years and years ago. Funny enough, it actually was a Russian player. There was a guy at some Russian LAN who basically said, I think to like Lurpus or something mental, some like Western player, just told him like, yeah, in the game, they can't even stop us. If my phone rings, then they are going B. And he would just play on stage with his fucking phone on the desk and he was know if they were Russian B or not. So like when that wasn't known, that's pretty creative. I mean, maybe that like coach bug thing that people kept activating or whatever in CSGO is not a bad one. The problem, as Monte says, is if it's going to be creative, you better get away with it. If it's like not a good heist movie, you get caught at the end, is it?
I'm sure there was some creative cheating based off of what, people being able to install certain like cheats onto their mice or keyboard hardware and then bring them in with them. That's why a lot of tournament organizers, one of the things Riot does is that you have to send them factory sealed versions of your peripherals, and the referees like lock them right in between your games. So you're never alone with your peripherals in a way that you could install potential cheats on them. Also, most of them are, most of the tournament PCs are just isolated from the internet these days, or a very limited functionality outside of playing the game. But I mean, the whole joke is obviously it's not real. Well, it might be real. It's probably not real, but the whole anal beads vibrating is actually an insanely good way to cheat in esports too, because you can just Morse code it, or 2 vibrations in your butt is A, 1 is B. Tells you which lane they're ganking potentially, right? Cheating is very interesting because almost all esports, unlike traditional sports, have asymmetric.
I'll just throw this out there. That's another reason why Lena and Doublelift, when he was on Team Liquid and she was on TSM, is a massive conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Think it through. You do the work in your mind, guys. Just saying, that's opened that door wide open. Well, I don't know how wide open it is, but
it could be wide open. Which is more important for a
definitely
healthy competitive
every Worlds.
Jesus. Which is more important for a healthy competitive atmosphere? Camaraderie between regions or rivalry between regions? Rivalry.
Not even a real fucking question. It's obviously the latter, isn't it? It's obviously. The joke is this is what people miss all the time. The true rivalries eventually become camaraderies through the mutual respect of making each other better. That's why the greater, like Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier was beating the shit out of each other, but they loved each other after their careers because they knew what that brought out of each other. That's the same with all great rivalries. Yep. The Boston, the Celtics and the Lakers talk like fondly about the 80s now. They hate each other's guts. So the joke is camaraderie. Actually, I think is a follow-on byproduct of most rivalries, as long as you don't do the stuff where you say like outrageous things about the guy's religion or his mom or some shit like that. As long as you keep it in the sport, I think it actually makes like the Cowboys 49ers was the shit in the 90s.
Yeah. Final question. Mad getting first All-Pro in 4 roles plus the MVP and then failing so hard thereafter plus play-ins got me thinking about these awards and if there's an even more egregious example that has happened in the past. The most egregious. Has there been one? This is definitely a you question, Thorin.
Does he mean just in League of Legends?
I think in general. I think this is a general one.
Oh, there's a bunch. Like there's got to be some like basically any one where someone's like considered the best and then they just flunk completely and go like I'll give you a good one. I think it actually was TI5, the one where Evil Geniuses won without RTZ. Team Secret in the summer, so a month or two before TI, won like 4 tournaments in a row, and RTZ was amazing, and S4 was amazing, and this team was considered like a super team of all players. It was all those different guys coming under the Secret brand, and in fact, that was even funny enough, like you're saying about Dota, that was people trying to be like, right, we're going to go with this like guy who just has loads of money instead of an org, like Evil Geniuses, lol, but we're just going to get paid loads, what is business? And they thought that could last forever, so they went to that team, and then when they went to work the TI, I think they came like 7th to 8th or something ridiculous. So like when you thought you were going to win the shit, and then also the little extra detail was the team he'd left won without him. Evil Jesus won without him, so it just made him look totally stupid, didn't he? Even though it's not like his fault. But yeah, that's a pretty good one. I think that's got to be up there.
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of misses just in general with All Pro because of the voting system that they've implemented. Unfortunately, there's just too much potential for trolling in there that we've, as we've seen. And sadly, knowing that those votes will be public doesn't seem to deter people, which is
It's mad, isn't
baffling
it?
to me. I thought that would actually deter people, but you guys have to remember that getting all those votes is like pulling teeth because nobody submits them. Half the players are just going to be like, oh shit, I forgot to do that. And this guy's asked me 12 times now to submit my list. Well, here's just a fucking list I didn't really think about. Yeah, it's just all the players on the best team, whatever. Like the problem is that people just, it's a combination of people outright trolling and then not giving a fuck.
Oh, I've got a good one, actually. And this has reminded me of a really good one. It's an old school one, so a lot of people in Counter-Strike won't even know this. But in Counter-Strike, one of the original dynasties was the original NIP, and then that core became SK Gaming, the Swedish team with Heaton and Porty and these guys. And in later years, they brought back the NIP brand in 2006. 2005, and they made what on paper was one of the craziest super teams ever, because they took the SK players who were the stars, and then they brought in like some people from the Eyeballers team that had beaten them the year earlier, like Hyper and Vild, and they made this crazy super team. And this is what's mental. They went to a local Swedish LAN where their competition, they were like the massive marquee team, and then there were a bunch of like mixed teams of good pros like Khan and DSN and people like that. And then, are you ready? They managed to lose in like a qualifier to a fun friends mix team featuring the demo admin of SK Gaming, their former org. Beat them in a match. And this super team had to like kick half of the star players. They went back to SK and just make like a normal team. Like, oh, that's one of the most mental ones. Because like I say, that's like essentially if like Tom Brady had left and made this box super team, and then like the actual quarterback for the Patriots then was like fucking the janitor of the Patriots organization, and then he won the Super Bowl. Oh, not the Super Bowl, just a regular season game. Then just making that one, I guess. Sorry. So that's a people all reach.
All right. That's it for our questions for this week. We will be back on what, the 11th? Hold on. Yes, the 11th. I believe that is. Let me check the schedule real quick. Looks like, yes, we'll be back on the 11th of October with the next show halfway through the group stage. So we'll have one full round robin in the groups completed. No doubt some crazy upsets to talk about at that point in time. Perhaps we'll have a guest for that episode. Who knows? We'll see you then.